Chapter 836. Second miss, you said you broke the lantern. Where is the lantern now? Could it be that someone happened to pass by and take your broken lantern away? What's more, you don't know the servant who carried the broken lantern away, do you? When Shichi seemed not to see Xiao Jie's pitiful look of crying in panic and said such words. As soon as he said this, it was almost a foregone conclusion. Even if Xiao Jie lied 1,000 times, it was impossible for her to produce real evidence to prove it. What the Ministry of Justice needed the most was proof and evidence, not a witness like her who always said she was wrong. Xiao Jie could only cry and try to get away with it. When Shichi took a step back and cupped his hands to Xiao Jing and Xiao Hua then. Duke Xing, first young master, it is obviously related to Second Mississippi. I have something to do, so I have to leave now. If you need me tomorrow, just send someone to pass a message to me. He didn't call himself as he used to. He used I to represent his current identity as an official of the Ministry of Justice. What he said later was to guarantee that he could testify for this matter. Xiao Wanru didn't know whether it was good for Xiao Jing and others, but she knew that it was good for her. When Shichi's words were equivalent to asking for a guarantee from an official of the Ministry of Justice, which was more useful than any witness. Old Madam asked Xiao Jie to plot against her in order to get a handle on her so that she could hold her hostage in the following matters. Up to now, Xiao Wanru had basically understood Old Madam's meaning. A sneer slowly appeared in her eyes. Although when Shichi's behavior was a little strange, it would only benefit her. She would wait and see what Old Madam would say to her next. She couldn't use her backup plan for the time being. After when Shichi finished speaking, he cupped his hands to Old Madam on the high seat, turned around and strode away. Seeing him leave in a cool manner, Old Madam felt suffocated. At this time, no one would believe it if she said it had nothing to do with Xiao Jie. Mother, it's getting late. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Xiao Jing looked around and said. This was a matter of the inner court. He and Xiao Hua could leave as long as the mansion didn't intend to disclose it. It could be regarded as a matter of the inner court. Xiao Wanru sneered. Things had come to this point, but he still wanted to avoid it. She took a step forward and bowed deeply to Xiao Jing. She looked up and said, Second uncle, second sister is involved in the fire. Don't you want to know why she did this? Her words were extremely sharp, almost pointing out that Xiao Jie was the arsonist. I didn't set the fire. I really didn't set the fire. I really left with a maid. Xiao Jie was so anxious that she argued despite her tears. Second sister, are you trying to say that I sent someone to get you? Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Jie and asked with a cold look. Then she said before Xiao Jie could answer, in this case, second sister, how about going to the hall of the Ministry of Justice tomorrow? Let's see if the people from the Ministry of Justice believe second sister or me. I'll go. I'll go. Xiao Jie said fiercely. That's a deal. Please point out the culprit, second sister, Xiao Wanru said meaningfully. Old Madam slapped the table heavily and said sternly, both of you are from respectable families. How can you say that we'll go to the hall of the Ministry of Justice? Second brother, you and Hua can leave now. I'll deal with it. Old Madam waved to Xiao Jing and said. Xiao Jing nodded and took a few steps. He looked back at Xiao Wanru. He couldn't see through his niece. He couldn't tell whether she was really lucky or something else at the moment. Xiao Wanru stood there with her head lowered and looked a little angry. No one would be happy to be framed. Her reaction at the moment should be the most direct one. She didn't bear it and directly took action. It was much simpler than a niece who knew how to bear it. Even when Xiao Wanru stopped him just now, he didn't get angry. If he was really scheming, he should bear it at this time and take action when Rui and Great Elder Princess came tomorrow. But she couldn't bear it, so she shouldn't be so scheming. It seemed that it was when Shichi who messed up today's matter. Xiao Jing had always known Wen Shiqi, who had always been indifferent to human relationships. His son had been friends with him for a long time, but they just did each other a favor. He didn't expect that Wen Shiqi would suddenly take action. What did he mean? Could it be that there was a prince behind Wen Shiqi? Thinking of this, Xiao Jing immediately lost his composure and turned his attention from Xiao Wanru to Wen Shiqi. He turned around and strode out of the Chuntang courtyard. He went straight back to the study and asked someone to investigate Wen Shiqi. Wen Shiqi didn't have much to do with what happened today, but he reached out to take responsibility for it. It was so strange. Xiao Jing left with Xiao Hua then. After they left, the room became dull again. Old Madam, who was sitting in the chair, looked at Xiao Jia coldly. She only stared at Xiao Jia and shivered, not even daring to cry. The room was terribly quiet, and Xiao Jia's increasingly panicked and rapid breathing could almost be heard. Grandma. Xiao Jia couldn't help crying. Kneel down before your fifth sister and make tea to apologize. Old Madam's words almost came out from the gaps between her teeth, which made Xiao Jia tremble a few times. She turned to look at Xiao Wanru and cried sadly, "Fifth sister." She didn't want to kneel down. There were other servants here. If she, the elder sister, knelt down, she would be ashamed in the future. Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Jia extremely coldly and calmly. There was a depth and coldness in her eyes that Xiao Jia couldn't understand. Xiao Jia felt very regretful at this time. She had known that Xiao Wanru was not easy to deal with, but she had listened to old Madam's words. Now, not only did she not get any benefits, but she was even pushed out by old Madam. But she didn't dare to tell old Madam about it. She just hoped that Xiao Wanru could let her go. Fifth sister, I really didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. I was afraid, so I wanted to ask you to help me share some of the burden. Grandma has always loved you. With your help, she will definitely not punish me severely. Xiao Jia begged Xiao Wanru and sobbed. Her words sounded very honest, and she confessed that she had indeed lied just now. However, she had lied because she was afraid. Seeing that Xiao Wanru's expression remained unchanged, Xiao Jia continued, "Fifth sister, I really didn't mean it. I just accidentally touched the lamp when I was writing. Later, I couldn't put it out, so I wanted to run out to call for help. When I saw the fire, I was scared, so. Now Xiao Jia had to take all the blame. It was impossible to say that she had set the fire, but she could say that she had been careless." Seeing that Xiao Jia who spoke more and more fluently and regretted more and more, Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart. It was rare for Xiao Jia to be smart for once. She knew that it was impossible for her to quibble, so she had to take all the blame. She had accidentally taken all the blame. As long as the mansion didn't pursue the matter, it was useless for others to say anything. Old Madam, who was sitting in the upper seat, looked better. This was the best result. At present, Xiao Jia's words also explained the reason why she had been flustered before. It was much simpler than saying that she had set the fire herself. She turned to look at Xiao Wanru and saw that her pink little face was tense. It could be seen that she was very angry and annoyed. At present, no matter what Xiao Jia said, she just looked at Xiao Jia angrily and said nothing. "Fifth sister, look." Old Madam's voice slowed down. "Grandma, I don't want to forgive second sister. This time, I started the fire. If she kills someone next time, will second sister blame me? There are so many people in the mansion, and I'm not very familiar with second sister. I don't understand why second sister doesn't push the blame to others, but must push it to me." Xiao Wanru interrupted old Madam in a cold voice. She knew that old Madam's intention was to turn the big matter into a small matter and the small matter into nothing. It would be better for her to accept this grievance in silence, but she didn't want to. She didn't intend to show her magnanimity with any sisterly affection. "Fifth sister, it's indeed second sister's fault. Don't worry. I will punish her well. I can't let you suffer such a loss in vain. Old Madam comforted Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru shook her head firmly, but there were tears in her watery eyes. When she looked at Old Madam, her eyes were full of tears. Grandma, I know that I've been living outside since I was a child and I'm not close to my relatives in the mansion, but it's just on the surface. I'm getting closer to my relatives step by step, but my relatives are thinking about how to destroy me. Grandma, I won't forgive second sister. After Xiao Wanru finished speaking, she turned around and left in tears, leaving Xiao Jia on the spot. An appropriate show of weakness was to show a tough and unreconciled attitude, so as to avoid Old Madam's empty talk of sisterly affection. Old Madam wanted to stop Xiao Wanru, but seeing that she had already reached the door, she could only watch her leave. Then her eyes fell on Xiao Jia. It was this girl's fault. She told lies one after another, so that no one believed her now. Kneel down. Old Madam reprimanded her sternly. Seeing Xiao Wanru leave in such a tough manner, Xiao Jia had long been at a loss of what to do. Old Madam reprimanded her and hurriedly knelt down. She cried and said, Grandma, I really don't know, why did this happen? I really did as you said. When she said this, a teacup at her feet was smashed heavily. She was so scared that she immediately stopped talking and looked at Old Madam, who was sitting high above, in horror. Go, don't sleep tonight. Go to the Buddha hall at the back to calm down and get rid of the anger. If you don't keep your mouth shut, I'm afraid that you will even lose your life in the end. Old Madam reprimanded her gloomily. Two old maids came over and pulled Xiao Jia out. Xiao Jia did not dare to struggle. She just turned around and cried sadly, Grandma, Grandma. Chapter 837. The people of Minister Zhao's mansion got the news the next morning. After receiving the news, Old Madam of Minister Zhao's mansion was so angry that she came over in person. Old Madam met Old Madam Zhao in the flower hall. Xiao Caihuan and Xiao Wanru accompanied Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion, while Zhao Shiran came with Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. After everyone was seated, Old Madam Zhao didn't drink tea. She looked at Old Madam coldly and asked, What does your mansion mean? If you don't like Ran, we cannot marry each other. Why did you do such a thing? You said it was a very small courtyard, but now even this courtyard is gone, right? Seeing that Old Madam Zhao came to denounce them, Old Madam lowered her attitude and said with a smile, How can I not be satisfied with Miss Zhao? I have seen such a beautiful girl grow up. How can I not like her? But this is really an accident. Accident? You can burn all the furniture in Ran-er's dowry by accident. This is the furniture we have prepared for more than 10 years since Ran was a child. I didn't expect it to be destroyed before it was used. You. Old Madam Zhao coughed loudly. Zhao Shiran hurriedly stood behind Old Madam Zhao and gently patted her back. Only then did Old Madam Zhao come to her senses. Seeing her calm face and peaceful expression, Xiao Wanru slightly narrowed her watery eyes, and then slowly lowered her head to the ground in front of her. She quietly listened to the two old madams quarreling above. Xiao Caihuan was a little anxious. She had known what had happened last night early in the morning and even knew that Xiao Wanru was involved in it. But she didn't know the details. Seeing that Xiao Wanru was silent, she leaned over and asked with concern, Fifth sister, do you feel uncomfortable? Xiao Wanru shook her head and said nothing. Fifth sister, if you feel uncomfortable, go to have a rest first. I will accompany Grandma here. Xiao Caihuan became more and more concerned. She felt that Xiao Wanru didn't look very good today. Xiao Wanru did not look very good. After returning home, she didn't fall asleep immediately. She first thought about everything, and then analyzed Wen Shiqi's character. She felt that it didn't seem like something Wen Shiqi would do. Shouldn't he be aloof from the world? Speaking of it, it actually had little to do with Wen Shiqi. Given Wen Shiqi's character, he really didn't seem to be the kind of person who would take the initiative to intervene. However, he intervened and even stood on her side. Xiao Wanru couldn't figure it out. Thinking about it, she fell asleep, but kept dreaming at night. There were scenes from his previous life, and there were also scenes from this life. Every time, it would end in a nightmare. The final scene was still that bloody scene. So many women had died. Was he crazy? Why was it like this? There was a vague answer in her heart that she didn't dare to believe. Despair and darkness. Had he died at that time? The pair of eyes blinded by despair and thick darkness. A person like him didn't even care about his own life, so how could he care about others? Xiao Wanru suddenly woke up from the nightmare and didn't fall asleep. She stopped thinking about Wen Shiqi and tried to think about what had happened after she entered the imperial palace in her previous life. What had happened to her after entering the imperial palace? How did she get to know Chu Luqian? Did she know Chu Luqian or did they really know each other? She was at a loss in her memory. She couldn't remember, had a headache, and was dull all night. Today, her face was as pale as snow. At first glance, it was obvious that she was not in good spirits. Xiao Wanru shook her head slightly and refused politely, "I'm fine." "Thank you, third sister." While they were talking, old Madame Zhao had calmed down. She picked up the teacup at hand and took a sip. "Go ahead. Let's end this matter now. Of course, we will choose a good courtyard to prepare for the marriage again. Don't worry. We will definitely not let the first Miss Xiao feel aggrieved. The things we buy will only be of good quality. As for the burned part, we will definitely compensate you according to the original price. We will definitely make you satisfied." Old Madam promised repeatedly. "Choose a good courtyard. I heard that it was a miss of your mansion who made a mistake this time. I also heard that this courtyard was chosen by the second miss of your mansion." Old Madame Zhao put down the teacup and said sarcastically. It was not easy to inquire about what happened last night, but it was not a secret that Xiao Jia had chosen a courtyard. "Don't worry, old Madame Zhao. Since you are here, please help me choose this time. As long as you choose the right courtyard, our mansion will not say anything." Old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion patted her chest repeatedly and promised. Xiao Wanru's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and her eyes were full of coldness. As expected, they came for her father's courtyard. In fact, Minister Zhao's mansion and Duke Xing's mansion had colluded to occupy the Chu Huan courtyard when her father was the heir of the mansion. The current show was just to shut her grandma up. If it was confirmed by Xiao Jia, yesterday that she had really sent someone to talk to Xiao Jia, she would be blamed for it. She would say that it was because of the fault of a miss of the mansion. At that time, even if her grandma wanted to help her, she would not be able to say it. After all, it was probably she who had set the courtyard on fire. Otherwise, the courtyard would not have caught fire after Xiao Jia left. Moreover, if it was confirmed that her servant girl had been involved in it, old Madam would not investigate it. On the surface, she showed that she wanted to protect her, but in fact, she silently put the blame on her. This kind of silent attitude of not investigating it was the most harmful. Even if she wanted to defend herself, she could not. Moreover, she had to express her gratitude to old Madam. She gently pursed her lips. She wanted to see how they would act today and how they would occupy the Chu Huan courtyard. She raised her head as if she felt something and met Zhao Shiran's gentle eyes. Seeing Xiao Wanru looking back at her, she smiled softly, which was very gentle and made people have a good impression on her. Xiao Wanru lowered her head and continued to be a quiet listener, watching them continue to act. As for the first Miss Xiao, it seemed that she was not a simple character. "Let's choose by ourselves. I'm afraid that if we choose at the right time, we will say that it's not good." Old Madame Zhao sneered. "Of course not. As long as old Madam likes it and it's empty, we can choose any courtyard." Old Madam promised again and again with a smile. She became more and more humble. "Well, that's what your mansion promised. Don't go back on your word. Old Madame Zhao looked at Old Madame with satisfaction and said. Of course. Old Madame seemed to want to keep the peace. She pointed to Xiao Wanru and Xiao Caihuan and said, these are my two granddaughters, the granddaughters of the first branch and the third branch respectively. Both of them also agree to this matter. Third Miss Xiao, fifth Miss Xiao. Old Madame Zhao was not ignorant of the two of them. Her eyes fell on them, and the most important thing was Xiao Wanru. She looked at them carefully and nodded repeatedly. The two misses of your mansion are really as beautiful as pearls and immortal dew. They are really good. After saying that, she waved to them. Xiao Caihuan and Xiao Wanru stood up together. Old Madame Zhao took off a pair of bracelets from her hand, put one on Xiao Caihuan's hand, and was about to put the other on Xiao Wanru's hand. It's the first time we meet, and I don't have anything good. I'll give these bracelets to you too. Her attitude was very gentle, which was completely different from the way she treated Old Madame just now. She looked like an amiable elder. At first glance, Xiao Wanru knew that the bracelets were very valuable. Then she looked at Old Madame's other clothes. Although they were expensive, they were not ostentatious. Only the bracelets showed a different kind of magnificence. At first glance, it could be seen that they were specially prepared for young girls. The 3 rubies inlaid on them were shining in everyone's eyes. What's more, Old Madame had promised on her behalf just now. If she took the bracelets again, she would not be able to say no later. Even if her maternal grandmother came over, with her promise, her maternal grandmother could not say anything. One was tough, while the other was gentle. She wanted to deal with not only her but also her maternal grandmother. Xiao Wanru took a step back, avoided Old Madame Zhao's hand, and respectfully bowed sideways to Old Madame Zhao. I don't dare to accept such a valuable gift from you, Old Madame. Xiao Caihuan, who had been looking at the bracelets in her hand happily, was stunned. She hurriedly took the bracelets from her hand and respectfully handed them over. Old Madame, this is really too valuable. We don't dare to accept it. Xiao Caihuan tried her best to keep in line with Xiao Wanru. What had happened yesterday had made Xiao Wanru unhappy, so she did not intend to have another relationship with Xiao Wanru today. Even though Xiao Caihuan was attracted by the bracelets and Old Madame on the side seemed to appreciate her actions, Xiao Caihuan still felt that it was better to keep in line with Xiao Wanru at this time. Old Madame Zhao's smile froze on her face. She held the bracelets in her hand and looked back at Old Madame. The smile on Old Madame's face was also very ugly at this time. Although she was smiling, she did not look like she was really smiling. That was her fake smile. Third girl, fifth girl, we don't dare to refuse an elder's gift. Hurry up and thank Old Madame of Zhao. Old Madame took a deep breath and suppressed the anger and irritation in her heart. This was a slap in the face for her. She actually refused Old Madame of Zhao's mansion's kindness in front of her. Didn't this clearly mean that what she had said before did not count? Xiao Caihuan hesitated. She looked at the bracelets in her hand and then at her grandmother's face. She did not know whether she should follow her heart and obey her grandmother's words this time. However, she was afraid that Xiao Wanru would be angry and turn back to peek at Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru raised her head and looked at Old Madame with a little coldness and anger in her eyes. Old Madame inexplicably felt that something was wrong. She hurriedly said with a gloomy face, "Fifth girl, are you going to disobey me?" Chapter 838. Xiao Wanru raised her eyes slightly and said stubbornly, "Grandma, except for the courtyard where my father and mother live, Old Madame Zhao can choose all the empty courtyards in the mansion, but not my father's courtyard." Xiao Wanru said bluntly. She didn't want to give Old Madame an evasive attitude. Since she couldn't avoid it, she didn't want to avoid it anymore. That courtyard belonged to her father and mother, as well as the future heir of Duke Xing's mansion. Old Madame wanted to use this method to seize the position of heir of Duke Xing's mansion and create the illusion that the heir of Duke Xing's mansion had been decided by Xiao Hua and she would never agree. In the last life, in order to seize the position of heir of Duke Xing's mansion, they killed all the members of her family. How could this hatred be covered up by the position of heir of Duke Xing's mansion? You. Old Madame Zhao was stunned and looked at the girl in front of her in disbelief. She was really just a gentle girl who gave people a very charming and moving feeling. But that was all. How could a girl from an aristocratic family be distinguished by her appearance? How could an orphan girl with no parents have the courage to say such words? Did she mean to embarrass her in front of her? Old Madame Zhao, who came to her senses, trembled with anger. She pointed at Xiao Wanru and said to Old Madame sternly, "Old Madame, is this how you teach your daughter?" What are you talking about? You just promised to make it up to us. Is this how you make it up to us? Wanru, kneel down and apologize to Old Madame Zhao. Old Madame's face darkened, and she scolded her sternly with cold eyes. Grandma, I don't know what I did wrong. Why do you want me to apologize like this? Xiao Wanru said lightly. She glanced at Zhao Shiran and saw the shock in his eyes. Obviously, she didn't expect that Xiao Wanru dared to say such words in front of Old Madame. Her eyes became gloomy for a moment. How can you be so disrespectful to your elders? Old Madame was very angry, but she couldn't really hit Xiao Wanru. Great Elder Princess would definitely not let her get what she wanted. The last plan made her fall behind Great Elder Princess, so she cooperated with Old Madame Zhao. Grandma, I'm just telling the truth. I'm afraid that Old Madame Zhao doesn't know it, so I made it clear in advance so that I won't be able to live in the courtyard and make things difficult for you. Xiao Wanru said coldly. Old Madame was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. Old Madame Zhao looked Xiao Wanru up and down, and then a trace of contempt flashed in her eyes. Xiao Wanru really grew up in a small place. It seemed that she didn't even know basic etiquette. How dare she say such words? Did she get her confidence from Great Elder Princess? But even Great Elder Princess had no reason to interfere in the affairs of Duke Xing's mansion all the time. Fifth Miss Xiao, right? What you said is actually wrong. Your father and mother have been dead for so long. Is it possible that this courtyard has been empty all the time and no one lives here? Old Madame Zhao said coldly. Why not? This courtyard isn't meant for others to live in anyway. Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows. She did not feel so much pressure when facing Old Madame Zhao. After all, Old Madame Zhao was not her official elder on the surface. I heard that Fifth Miss Xiao came from an ordinary family. Is this the rule taught in your mansion in the past? Old Madame Zhao said sarcastically, you are really narrow-minded. But now you are the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Don't bring your bad habits to Duke Xing's mansion and forget your current identity. Thank you for reminding me, old madam. I know my identity, so I want to keep the courtyard where my father and mother live. There are many empty courtyards in the mansion. If First Miss Xiao is satisfied, you can use the courtyard where I live. I can choose a courtyard to live in for the time being. Xiao Wanru said with a smile. It seemed that she had taken a step back. In order to keep the last memory of her father and mother, she was even willing to give up her courtyard. The meaning in her words was sad. Old Madame Zhao was so angry that her hands trembled. Xiao Wanru was going to marry Prince Chen 2 months later. If she was asked to give up her previous courtyard for Xiao Hua and to use as a bridal chamber at this time, not only Duke Xing's mansion would be criticized, but also Minister Zhao's mansion would not be able to afford it. Xiao Wanru was the future Prince Chen's wife. Although old Madame Zhao didn't think that Prince Chen really treated fifth Miss Xiao well, Xiao Wanru's identity was there. After Xiao Wanru got married, she would be a first-class princess. Even old Madame Zhao had to salute her when she saw her. No one could afford the reputation of forcing her to give up her courtyard. However, Xiao Wanru was not married yet. A married woman regarded her husband's family as her heaven, while an unmarried woman regarded her father's family as her heaven. She had no reason to resist now. She turned her head and did not say anything to Xiao Wanru. She looked at old Madame angrily and said, if this is the attitude of fifth Miss Xiao in our mansion, it's better not to make this marriage. The girls in our mansion really dare not have a sister-in-law like fifth Miss Xiao. She has put on the airs of a prince's wife before marrying into our mansion. Her sarcasm was a slap in the face. No matter what, Xiao Wanru had not married yet, let alone married into the royal family. Grandma. Zhao Shiran reached out to gently pull old Madame Zhao's arm a few times and called her softly. It seemed that she did not want old Madame Zhao to blame Xiao Wanru like this. Old Madame Zhao also seemed to be angry. After saying that, she stood up and was about to leave with Zhao Shiran. Old Madame Zhao, please wait a minute. Old Madame hurriedly stood up to stop her. If old Madame Zhao really left, the marriage between the two families would be ruined. Old Madame was very satisfied with this marriage. Fifth girl, apologized to old Madame Zhao. As she said, she turned to Xiao Wanru and reprimanded her. Xiao Wanru stood aside indifferently, as if she did not know that this matter was going to get out of hand. Seeing the scene in front of her, old Madame Zhao was so angry that her face turned livid. Okay, the fifth miss of our mansion is so nice. She is not satisfied with our Well, since our is not recognized by fifth Miss Xiao, the future Princess Chen, we'd better go back, so as not to get into such an embarrassing situation. Fifth girl, why don't you kneel down? Seeing that things had come to this point, old Madame was so angry that she reached out and wanted to slap Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru took a step back and avoided old Madame's slap. When she was about to speak, she suddenly heard a leisurely voice from the door. Did I come at the wrong time? The man's clear voice stunned everyone in the flower hall. They turned around and saw Chu Luchen standing at the door with a gentle smile on his face. It seemed that Chu Luchen had accidentally barged in. He raised his beautiful eyes slightly, looked at the stiff faces of the people in the flower hall, and then walked in slowly. Dressed in a dark blue official robe, he looked noble and extraordinary, but with a trace of sickly beauty. As soon as he appeared, he stunned everyone in the flower hall. The butler of Duke Xing's mansion behind him was anxious. It was not that he didn't want to stop Prince Chen, but the problem was that he couldn't stop him. It was too late to call his master immediately. After Prince Chen entered the door, he asked old Madame Zhao for the location of the flower hall to enter the mansion, and then took him to lead the way all the way. But what happened? Chu Liuchen's beautiful eyes wandered, glanced at the people in the flower hall roughly, and walked in. The two old madams reacted quickly and hurriedly saluted to him. Although Chu Luchen rarely appeared in front of others, they would go to the palace to accompany the Empress Dowager from time to time, so they had seen him several times and recognized his identity at a glance. It was the first time for Zhao Shiran to see Chu Luchen, so he looked at Chu Luchen in surprise. This was Prince Chen, who everyone said would not live long. But now he looked no different from a normal person in other aspects, except that his face was a little pale and his lips were a little pale. When her eyes were swept by Chu Liuchen's eyes, she immediately blushed and hurriedly bowed sideways. She only felt that her heart was beating rapidly, and she was as shy as a little girl. Zhao Shiran was the first miss of Minister Zhao's mansion, and there were several younger sisters and younger brothers. In the past, she rarely lost her composure like this. She couldn't help thinking of the rumors among the misses of aristocratic families. They all said that Prince Chen was unparalleled handsome and the most outstanding man in the whole capital city. Unfortunately, he was congenitally deficient and sick. Otherwise, with such a noble and handsome face, how many women wouldn't want to marry him? Even she almost lost her mind at this moment. Zhao Shiran almost lost her mind, and Xiao Caihuan really lost her mind. Her veil was still on her face, so her expression couldn't be seen, but she looked at Chu Luchen almost stupidly. If she could only be a concubine in this situation, she would be more willing to be Chu Liuchen's concubine than Commandery Prince Qing. Xiao Wanru also bowed sideways and said, "Greetings, Your Highness. Dispense with the formalities." Chu Luchen said casually, and then stood beside Xiao Wanru. He reached out to help Xiao Wanru, and said with an increasingly gentle look, "What's wrong? What happened just now?" Old Madame Zhao stood up, and her heart beat rapidly. She was not as excited as Zhao Shiran, but shocked. Everyone in the imperial palace knew that Prince Chen seemed gentle, but in fact, he was very ruthless. If someone provoked him, he would act extremely coldly. Moreover, he was protected by the emperor and the empress dowager in the imperial palace. Even the masters in the imperial palace would take a detour when they saw Prince Chen, not to mention the officials like them. They were afraid of accidentally provoking this devil. What was the meaning of the current situation? Did Prince Chen really love fifth Miss Xiao? Old Madame Zhao frowned and felt that it was better to think about the matter she had discussed with Old Madame before. Nothing. I just want to talk about the courtyard where my father and mother used to live. Xiao Wanru stood up and said softly. What happened to their courtyard? Could it be that my uncle has issued a decree to decide on the heir of Duke Xing for you? Chu Luqian said slowly with a smile on his lips. He glanced at Old Madam with a faint smile and said, Congratulations, Old Madam. After so many years, the position of the heir of Duke Xing has finally been decided. It can be said that the dust has settled. Your Highness, you must be joking. How can this matter be decided so casually? Old Madam replied sullenly. She could suppress Xiao Wanru in front of her just now, but she did not dare to be rude in front of Prince Chen. No. All right, then this king might have misunderstood. Chu Luqian said casually. He turned his handsome eyes and said with a charming look, I heard that there is the handwriting left by the former heir of Duke Xing in that courtyard. I wonder if Old Madam can let me have a look. Chapter 839. Xiao Xuanzi stepped back calmly, thinking that he'd better stay away from his master. Needless to say, his master was angry. Judging from the situation when he came in just now, he knew that people in the flower hall were forcing fifth Miss Xiao. Xiao Xuanzi stole a glance at the two old madams above. These two really dared to bully anyone. They didn't know that fifth Miss Xiao would be under his master's control now. Your Highness, there is actually nothing to see in that courtyard. If you want to see it, you can. Old Madam's face was not very good. She could hear the unkindness in Chu Liuchen's words. Old Madam was not stupid. She just thought that this situation was unlikely to happen, but what did it mean now? Did Prince Chen really care about Xiao Wanru? Then can I trouble Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion and fifth Miss Xiao to take me to have a look? Chu Luqian said with an elegant smile, but just now I heard that Minister Zhao's mansion also wants to have a look at this courtyard. Why don't we go together? Old Madame Zhao was stunned, and her face became very ugly. She hurriedly shook her hand and said, I dare not. Your Highness, please go ahead. If it's not Old Madam's idea, then it's Miss Zhao's idea. Chu Luqian turned his eyes to Zhao Shiran, who was standing beside him, and his eyes became more and more shining. Zhao Shiran hurriedly lowered her head, and her heart beat wildly. She was half scared and half shy. She hurriedly bowed and replied, I dare not. Old Madame Zhao, are you really not going to have a look with us? I happen to be free today, so I can accompany you too. Chu Liuchen's eyes turned and fell on the two old madams who seemed to be nervous. Your Highness, you are welcome. Old Madam raised her smile and said a little stiffly. Your Highness, our Zhao's mansion doesn't mean this. It's just that the bridal chamber we prepared last night was burned down, and we want to choose another one in Duke Xing's mansion. In fact, we have no intention of choosing the courtyard of the former heir of Duke Xing, Old Madam Zhao respectfully said to Chu Luqian, and then said to Old Madam. No one is willing to do this kind of thing. Since it has been burned down, please prepare another courtyard. Time is a little tight. If we don't arrange this marriage well, then fifth Miss Xiao's marriage will be too hasty. Her words were sincere and reasonable, which made people feel comfortable, especially when she praised Chu Luqian at the end. Old Madame Zhao felt bitter in her heart. She really didn't know that Prince Chen would care about this marriage. When Old Madam discussed it with her before, she only said that they would work together to deal with Rui, and Great Elder Princess, and force Rui, and Great Elder Princess to make a concession and give up the empty Chu Huan courtyard. He didn't expect that Prince Chen would be involved. Minister Zhao was the minister of the Ministry of Works. When he returned to the mansion, he occasionally mentioned Prince Chen. Old Madame Zhao knew that Prince Chen was valued by the Emperor and the Empress Dowager and was much more important than the other princes. Sometimes Minister Zhao vaguely said that if Prince Chen recovered, it was uncertain who would inherit the throne in the future. Originally, old Madame Zhao didn't even care. She heard that the prince had been in poor health and it was uncertain whether he could live for a few more years. Now she saw that although the prince looked sicker and weaker than ordinary people, he basically didn't have a big impact. Moreover, he was wholeheartedly protecting the fifth Miss Xiao. Old Madame Zhao was very upset. She really wanted to reconsider the relationship with Duke Xing's mansion. If it weren't for the fact that the marriage between the two mansions had been settled and it happened to be arranged before the marriage between Xiao Wanru and Prince Chen, if something went wrong with their marriage, it might affect Prince Chen's marriage in the end. Old Madame Zhao even had the thought of breaking off the engagement. Would the position of heir of Duke Xing really fall into Xiao Hua's hands? Originally, an important factor for the engagement between the two families was that Xiao Hua would become the heir of Duke Xing and become Duke Xing in the future. At the very beginning, Madame of Duke Xing repeatedly mentioned this matter, and she was very sure that it would happen. At that time, Duke Xing's mansion had no other rivals, so everyone didn't care much about Xiao Yuanhao, the son of the former heir of Duke Xing. On the one hand, he was still young, and on the other hand, he was useless and couldn't compare with Xiao Hua at all. But later, because of Xiao Wanru, the marriage was delayed for 3 years. In the end, it was found that Xiao Wanru's intervention didn't change the principle of the marriage, so the two mansions settled the marriage. Later, because Xiao Wanru and Chu Luqian didn't have time to get married, their marriage was also advanced. But even so, old Madame Zhao didn't care much. In Duke Xing's mansion, this fifth Miss Xiao had no power at all, and she was still an unmarried girl. Even if she got married in the future, she would wholeheartedly serve Prince Chen, who was seriously ill. How could she have time to care about the affairs of Duke Xing's mansion? Moreover, as a married woman, she didn't have much power to manage the inheritance of her maiden family. At most, she could only say something on the side and couldn't make a decision. But in the current situation, old Madame Zhao felt that she had never thought of it. She really wanted to break off the marriage. Don't worry, old Madame Zhao. It will be settled immediately. Today, we will choose a good yard as the bridal chamber and try our best to decorate the room for the newlyweds. As for the furniture sent by your mansion, we will make up for all of them. Your mansion will be satisfied. Old Madame also knew that there was nothing she could do today. She forced a stiff smile on her face and tried to deal with this matter well. That's good. Then we'll leave first. Old Madame Zhao couldn't stay any longer. She said goodbye to old Madame, bowed to Chu Luqian, and walked out with Zhao Shiran. Chu Luqian didn't stop them. He watched them leave with a smile. After the people of Minister Zhao's mansion left, he turned to old Madame and asked, "Old Madame, can we go and have a look?" "Prince Chen, please." Old Madame had to smile. Prince Chen wanted to have a look, and his words were directed to her, so she could only accompany him. Old Madame went, and Xiao Wanru followed her. As for Xiao Caihuan, of course, she also went with them. The group of people went to Chu Huan Courtyard. When they arrived at Chu Huan Courtyard, the words on the huge screen wall were still there. Xiao Wanru stood in front of the screen wall and looked at the words written on it. She raised her head and read down the words one by one. As she read, her eyes turned slightly red. Her father's words were right in front of her, but the figure in her memory was so far away that she almost couldn't remember it. It was originally a memory from her childhood, but because she had been reborn, the distance between them had become even greater. Now that she saw his words again, it suddenly became clear. She bit her lip and tried hard to suppress the grief in her heart, but there was a trace of sadness in her eyes. In her last life, she didn't have a chance to see her father's figure or traces of his life until she died. All of this had been buried by Duke Xing's mansion, including the lives of herself and her relatives. "Old Madam, the former heir's courtyard is really good." Chu Liuchen's voice came into her ears with a little smile. Xiao Wanru looked sideways and saw that he was talking to old madam, so she didn't answer. At this time, she was in a very bad mood and was not in the mood to answer. It was the best that Chu Liuchen didn't ask her. This was originally the best courtyard in the whole Duke Xing's mansion, and it was for the eldest son to live in at that time. I didn't expect that the eldest son would end up like this. After he lost his temper and went out, he just died outside. Seeing the screen wall, old madam also thought of her eldest son. For a moment, she felt sad and choked with sobs. Is the courtyard where Duke Xing lives now not as good as this? Chu Liuchen didn't seem to notice old madam's abnormality and continued to raise his head to ask. The courtyard where the second son lives now is also good. Old madam had to suppress her sadness, gently wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief and answered. Xiao Jing now lived in the courtyard where the previous Duke Xing lived, so how could it not be good? Old madam didn't dare to hide this kind of thing. There is such a courtyard? Old madam, can you let me see it? There are also a few empty courtyards in my mansion. In the future, I will set up a courtyard for the inheritance of the heir, and the other one will be the courtyard where I live. The layout of Duke Xing's mansion is good, and I can take reference. Chu Liuchen walked 2 circles along the screen wall and asked old madam with a smile. His attitude was very kind and peaceful. Xiao Caihuan stared at Chu Liuchen closely. Looking at Chu Liuchen's behavior and appearance, which was like a handsome young master coming out of an ink painting, her heart beat wildly. She originally had feelings for Chu Liuchen, and at this time, her feelings were even more scorching. If she could marry such a person, even if she followed him as a concubine, it would be much better than following Commandery Prince Qing. The temperature in her heart was burning, and the temperature on her face was also burning. She had always wanted to say something, but she couldn't. At this time, hearing Chu Liuchen's words, she immediately said, "Grandma, I happen to be free, so I can accompany Prince Chen to second uncle's courtyard to have a look." After saying that, she lowered her head shyly, and her face blushed brilliantly. However, her face was still covered by a light veil, so it was not obvious that she was blushing and shy. Hearing Xiao Caihuan's words, old madam became even angrier. When she saw Xiao Caihuan's shy look, she was so angry that she wanted to slap Xiao Caihuan to wake her up. Was this what an unmarried miss from an aristocratic family should say? Moreover, there was Xiao Wanru, who was more suitable than her, by her side. Xiao Wanru was the most suitable person to accompany Chu Liuchen. They would get married in 2 months, so she didn't feel it was a big deal even if she was a little rude. What did Xiao Caihuan mean? Could it be that she liked Prince Chen? Old madam only felt that it was extremely absurd. What do you mean, old madam? Chu Liuchen glanced at Xiao Wanru, who was still immersed in sadness, and said slowly. The smile on his face slowly disappeared, and his handsome eyes narrowed slightly. A chill overflowed from his handsome face, with a murderous look that was difficult to be ignored. He was facing old madam, and Xiao Caihuan, who was behind him, happened to not see that his face had changed. She was still immersed in the beautiful hope. She was really willing to take Chu Liuchen to have a look. Old madam, however, saw Chu Liuchen's cold face and knew that it was not good. Xiao Caihuan had offended His Highness, but inexplicably, an extremely exciting idea suddenly flashed in her heart. Chapter 840. Since Your Highness Prince Chen wants to have a look, I will naturally accompany you. Old madam nodded, but she did not directly mention Xiao Caihuan, nor did she pay attention to what Xiao Caihuan had said before. Fifth miss, do you want to stay and have a look at the screen wall or accompany the prince to have a look at your second uncle's courtyard? Old madam turned to Xiao Wanru and asked. Xiao Wanru was immersed in the sadness of the past. The Chu Huan courtyard could not be entered at any time. Even if she wanted to enter, she had to get old madam's consent. It was rare for her to have such a chance to stay and have a look, so she naturally did not want to leave. Xiao Wanru shook her head gently, restrained the sadness at the bottom of her eyes, and said, Grandma, I still want to see my father's smile again. Well, you can have a look here first. Third Miss and I will accompany His Highness to have a look at your second uncle's courtyard. Old Madam said. Xiao Wanru nodded and glanced at Chu Luchen beside her. When she saw his face, she could not help but frown slightly. This prince did not look very happy. Seeing Xiao Wanru turn her eyes, Chu Luchen suddenly smiled and said gently to her, "Then you can have a look here first. I will come to you later." "Yes, Your Highness." Xiao Wanru bowed sideways and was more respectful in front of others. Of course, she did not find a reason to refuse. Her attitude made Chu Luchen feel a little better. He turned around and walked out. Old Madam winked at Xiao Caihuan and immediately followed him. Xiao Caihuan fell into a state of self-reproach after her words were directly ignored by Chu Liuchen's Old Madam. At this time, after receiving Old Madam's wink, she immediately became overjoyed and hurriedly ran a few steps to catch up with Chu Luchen. She was very happy in her heart. Xiao Caihuan left Xiao Wanru alone and took her with him. Was this intended by Grandma? Xiao Caihuan was both shy and excited, feeling that her whole heart was about to jump out. She felt more and more aggrieved. Why was it not Xiao Wanru but herself in the palace at that time? If Xiao Wanru had been poisoned at that time and had so many sores on her face, she would have been sent out of the palace at that time, and she would have been the legitimate Princess Chen. Just thinking of this made her extremely excited. She almost foolishly looked at Chu Liuchen's handsome back. If such a man could really marry her, what else could she ask for in this life? Xiao Caihuan didn't dare to get too close to Chu Luchen, but she didn't want to be too far away. She trotted 2 steps behind Chu Luchen and looked at him affectionately from time to time. Even Old Madam on the side glanced at her from time to time, but she didn't notice it. She focused all her attention on Chu Luchen. Seeing Xiao Caihuan's almost irrepressible obsession, Old Madam frowned and suddenly felt that her idea was not so good. The group of people stopped at the gate of Duke Xing's courtyard. Xiao Jing's courtyard was called Luofeng Courtyard, which was not in the inner courtyard. It was a separate courtyard in the outer courtyard. If he wanted to live in the inner courtyard, he would live in the courtyard of Madam of Duke Xing or other concubines. There was no separate courtyard for him in the inner courtyard. When he entered, the first thing he saw was a pavilion. It was located in a remote corner of the courtyard. If it wasn't for its prominent position, this pavilion would actually be very inconspicuous. This place is really high. Chu Luchen sighed deeply after standing still. This was originally a place where second uncle read books and rest, but because it is a little high, it is usually not used. Second uncle has another study for rest. Xiao Caihuan hurriedly stepped forward and explained. Is it empty? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and asked. It is empty, and there should be some sundries in it. I heard that few people go in here, so it has basically been abandoned. But because it is in second uncle's courtyard, he usually sends someone to clean it. Xiao Caihuan was very attentive. Hearing that Prince Chen actually talked to her, she was full of joy. Chu Luchen glanced at Xiao Caihuan coldly, and there was some coldness in his eyes, with the air of autumn and winter. Just one look showed a sense of coldness. However, at this time, Xiao Caihuan's mind was full of Chu Liuchen's gentle face and voice, so she didn't notice that his face had changed. Old Madam coughed in a low voice and scolded Xiao Caihuan, "Third maid, come to Grandma. Don't gossip if you don't know these things. Don't take what you heard as the truth and tell it to Prince Chen." Xiao Caihuan was inexplicably scolded and felt wronged, but she had to retreat to Old Madam's side. She lowered her head and pulled the handkerchief in her hand, feeling helpless and wronged. "Old Madam, do you mean that this pavilion has other uses?" Chu Luchen ignored Xiao Caihuan's entanglement. In his eyes, he couldn't see the shyness of other women at all. He looked up at this tall building, and there was a trace of deepness at the bottom of his eyes. This pavilion was actually very strange. This was originally a pavilion built in the early days of the public house. It was the main courtyard and also the main courtyard of the High Duke. With such a pavilion, one could usually handle affairs here, directly receive guests here, and even enjoy the scenery from above. However, later on, They felt that this was not good, so they built another study room. Old Madam explained. Why is it not good? You can directly receive guests in the courtyard, and you can also rest and enjoy the scenery. Isn't it a good thing? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and asked lazily. It was good at first, but later. Old Madam said hesitantly, as if she didn't know what to say. Oh, could it be that there are other mysteries in it? Chu Luchen's interest was aroused, and he looked at the pavilion that was obviously a little abandoned. Since he said so, Old Madam could only go on. It's not that there is any mystery. This courtyard was originally prepared for the eldest son, and the eldest son even moved some things here. It was originally for convenience when he moved in, but I didn't expect that in the end. Speaking of this, Old Madam sighed sadly and shook her head. Old Madam sighed sorrowfully and shook her head with a bitter voice. When she thought of her eldest son, she couldn't help feeling sad. Later, my second son moved in. I didn't want him to throw away his belongings, so I asked him to move into this high-rise building. Then, this attic was left empty. It didn't matter much. My second son didn't like this attic very much, and it was in the corner of the courtyard. My second son wanted to build a study room in it. The former heir of Duke Xing's things. Chu Luchen was quite surprised by this result. The former heir of Duke Xing's things couldn't be put in the previous courtyard? The eldest son and Infanta Qinghua lived in the previous courtyard. Infanta Qinghua had been living in it since she got married. When Infanta Qinghua married, she brought a lot of things, so the eldest son moved some things here. After that, the things in Chu Huan courtyard were mainly taken care of by Infanta Qinghua. Old Madam explained. This statement was very reasonable. The former heir of Duke Xing moved some things to Duke Xing's courtyard. As his father, Duke Xing would directly teach the former heir of Duke Xing at that time that it was normal to put some things here, so that he wouldn't go to the backyard to get something every time he needed it. Chu Luchen nodded and didn't ask any more. He was satisfied with Old Madam's explanation and walked into the courtyard. There were 2 servants guarding at the gate of the courtyard. Seeing Old Madam coming over and looking at Chu Luchen's appearance, they knew that he was not an ordinary guest, so they hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. Is the Duke here? Old Madam asked. The Duke is not in the courtyard. He hasn't come back yet. A servant answered cleverly. Old Madam frowned. What was Xiao Jing doing at this time when such a thing happened yesterday? But she couldn't ask in front of Chu Luchen, so she could only say, open the gate. Prince Chen wants to come in and have a look. Since Old Madam had said so, the servant certainly didn't dare to refuse. They opened the gate of the courtyard, and Chu Luchen walked in slowly. After entering the gate, he found that there was also a huge screen wall at the gate, which was similar to the screen wall in Chu Huan courtyard, which was very surprising. Did all the descendants of Duke Xing's mansion have such a habit? Chu Luchen went to the screen wall and found that it was no different from other screen walls. There was only a painting on it. When he went back inside, it was also a painting. Standing in front of the painting, Chu Luchen looked at it carefully and slightly raised the corners of his mouth. Old Madam thought that he seemed to be in a good mood, so she exhaled heavily. She was afraid that Prince Chen would be angry, but she couldn't see it. At this time, it seemed that he was fine, so it was not a big deal. Prince Chen should have seen that he had forced Xiao Wanru in the flower hall before, but he could still smile at the moment, which showed that Xiao Wanru was not so important in Prince Chen's heart. Now that Chu Luchen didn't leave, she couldn't leave either. She could only stop and wait for Chu Luchen to finish looking at it. Xiao Caihuan stood at the side of Chu Luchen. Seeing the clear smile on Chu Luchen's face, she also smiled. She rubbed the handkerchief in her hand again and again with a little shyness. She wanted to go up and talk to him, but she was afraid of being scolded by her grandmother. She wondered when she could be alone with Prince Chen. Old Madam, who painted this picture? Chu Luchen's attention fell on the painting, and he asked after looking at it for a while. I don't know who painted it. When it was rebuilt, it was customized by our Duke. I don't care about these things. Old Madam shook her head. She really didn't know these things, so she couldn't answer even if she wanted to. In fact, Duke's mansion had existed for a long time, and it was their ancestral home. But some places were destroyed in the war. This was the place that had been destroyed, and it was rebuilt later. But Old Madam only knew that it was rebuilt, and she didn't know how it was built. Chu Luchen didn't care. He just looked at the style of the painting carefully and asked, "Do you know if the craftsmen who built this courtyard are still there?" "Those craftsmen?" Old Madam hesitated for a moment and gave the answer hesitantly, "Your Highness, I really don't know who they are, but the old butler may know something. If you want to know, I will ask someone to call the old butler over." Chapter 841. Old Madam answered carefully and tried to make her words sound perfect, for fear of accidentally offending Prince Chen. She heard that Prince Chen was moody, unpredictable, and very bad. He was not the gentle person she saw in front of her. Old Madam had seen his cold face just now. "Let's wait for a while. I'm not in a hurry," Chu Luchen said casually. His smile was light but a little impatient. Old Madam frowned secretly. She didn't know how she offended this devil. She didn't know what to say at the moment and could only follow Chu Luchen carefully. Chu Luchen didn't say anything and walked forward with his hands clasped behind his back. Seeing that he just walked around the yard and didn't go to the main room, Old Madam breathed a sigh of relief. She was afraid that Prince Chen would go into the room regardless of anything and she couldn't stop him. "Your mansion hasn't chosen a heir yet?" Chu Luchen suddenly stopped and glanced sideways at Old Madam with a smile. It was difficult to answer this question, so Old Madam became more cautious. "It's not urgent for the time being. We have to wait and see." "Who does Old Madam like?" Chu Luchen asked again. "I haven't thought about it yet." Old Madam didn't dare to mention Xiao Hua En's name. "You haven't thought about it yet? It can be seen that your mansion's first young master is actually not very useful." Chu Luchen turned and walked out of the yard. Old Madam didn't dare to answer. She pretended not to hear it and followed him out of the yard with her head lowered. "Old Madam, please help yourself. I'm going to see 5th Miss Xiao." After going out of the door, Chu Luchen waved his hand like a master and said. Old Madam was supposed to follow him, but what Chu Luchen said just now made her speechless for a moment. She was afraid that Prince Chen would say something sharper later. "Saihuan, accompany Prince Chen." After thinking for a while, Old Madam calmed down and said to Xiao Saihuan with a smile. "Yes, Grandma." Xiao Saihuan was overjoyed. After bowing sideways to Old Madam, she raised her head ecstatically. She finally had a chance to get along with Prince Chen. How could she not be happy? Without her grandmother keeping an eye on her, she could talk to Prince Chen. "Did Old Madam ask her to follow me to keep an eye on me?" Chu Luchen glanced at Xiao Saihuan lightly and asked. "How would I dare to have such thoughts? I'm just afraid that your Highness doesn't know the way." Old Madam hurriedly explained. She did not dare to take a deep breath. She really did not dare to offend His Highness. "Just let a servant lead the way. Could it be that the 3rd Miss of your residence is familiar with this prince? Madam Dowager doesn't care about the inconvenience of a man and a woman. I am not married yet. If my reputation is ruined, it will be hard for me to explain." Chu Luchen said unhappily. His cold eyes swept over Xiao Saihuan with sarcasm. Xiao Saihuan's face turned pale at first and then turned red. Old Madam's face turned blue and white. She was too ashamed to show her face. Although she did have such thoughts, it was really shameful to hear Chu Luchen say it in front of her. What's more, the meaning of his words was very embarrassing. Even Old Madam could not resist it, and her face turned red in the end. "Your Highness, I'm sorry for my rudeness. Come on, lead His Highness to Chu Huan Courtyard." Old Madam bowed her head and said. Seeing this, Nanny Yu hurriedly stood up to lead the way for Old Madam. After Chu Luchen left with Nanny Yu, Xiao Saihuan burst into tears. At that moment, she was so ashamed that she could not show her face. She just thought that there was a hole in the ground, and she would go into it and never come out. What are you crying for? Useless thing. Old Madam said coldly. Xiao Caihuan was not the only one who was embarrassed. She glared at Xiao Caihuan. If she had not been so obvious, she would not have such an idea, and now she was severely humiliated by Chu Luchen. Grandma. Xiao Caihuan cried so hard that she could not make a sound. Go back. If you cry again, your face will be ruined. At that time, no one will want you. You don't have to think about something that you can't get. Old Madam was in a bad mood. At this time, she was not in the mood to comfort Xiao Caihuan, so she scolded her sternly. After that, she turned around and left with a group of people, leaving Xiao Caihuan sobbing, but she did not dare to cry again. She was also afraid that the scar on her face would not heal. Looking into the distance, she faintly saw Chu Liuchen's tall and straight figure. Why did such a beautiful man belong to Xiao Wanru? Why could Xiao Wanru win his kindness, but she could not? In fact, she did not ask for much. She did not want to ask for the position of princess, but couldn't she be his concubine? She stamped her feet hard, covered her face, turned around, and ran to her courtyard. She was going to find her father and ask him to help her. Since her father had a way to make Xiao Jia, or give up the marriage, he should also be able to get the position of a concubine from her fifth sister. She was also a concubine, but she wanted to marry into Prince Chen's mansion instead of Commandery Prince Qing's mansion. The carriage moved forward slowly, and it was very quiet in the carriage. After a long while, old Madame Zhao sighed and looked at her granddaughter sitting beside her with a little more love in her eyes. What do you think? Prince Chen should be satisfied with this marriage. Fifth Miss Xiao is the granddaughter of Rui and Great Elder Princess. Great Elder Princess has always been close to the Empress Dowager. This reason has already made Fifth Miss Xiao different in Prince Chen's eyes. Prince Chen is very close to the Empress Dowager, so he will be close to the Great Elder Princess. Zhao Shiran analyzed calmly with a gentle face and a sense of indifference, as if what she said had nothing to do with her at all. Is that all? Old Madame Zhao shook her head. It was the first time for her to see Fifth Miss Xiao. She slowly followed her own thoughts and said, it is said that this first Miss Xiao is the most beautiful. Even if she has fallen into such a situation, she still has infinite possibilities in the future. In my opinion, Fifth Miss Xiao is more outstanding. She has the beauty of a peony and the elegance of a peony. She is born charming but makes people feel distant and cold. She is a beautiful woman. Grandma, although there are few beauties in this world, there are not all of them. With Prince Chen's temperament, such a beauty can enter his heart, but it is impossible for him to always fall in love with her. Zhao Shiran's thoughts were similar to old Madame Zhao's. She had always been talented and knowledgeable. In terms of appearance, Prince Chen is incomparably handsome. Identity and appearance are part of it. With these, she will always have an advantage over other women. And if her brother becomes the heir of Duke Xing, it will be more beneficial for Prince Chen. Zhao Shiran said again. She said it as if she was not going to marry into Duke Xing's mansion and become Xiao Hua's wife soon. He looked at this matter from a far away, transcendent position. If this is the case, Ran's marriage is a little inappropriate. Old Madame Zhao frowned tightly. At the beginning, she had chosen this marriage with the intention of making her granddaughter the wife of heir of Duke Xing. If it was only the first young master, it was not worthy of the identity of the eldest lineal granddaughter in her mansion. At this time, old Madame Zhao also regretted that she had agreed to her granddaughter's marriage at the beginning. She had thought that it would be a piece of cake, but because of Prince Chen's intervention, there were many uncertain factors. Zhao Shiran closed her mouth. Before she saw Prince Chen, she thought that Prince Chen would not care too much about Xiao Wanru. But just now it seemed that at least Prince Chen should treat Xiao Wanru differently. Although she did not know how much he cared about Xiao Wanru or whether it was all because of the external conditions, no matter what, he did care about Xiao Wanru at this time. She would not be wrong just now. If it's really not good, just refuse this marriage, okay? Seeing that she did not speak, old Madame Zhao persuaded in a low voice. In fact, old Madame Zhao had not been very optimistic about this marriage, so it had been delayed for so long. It had been discussed for about 3 years, and it was only now that it was settled. The reason was that she was not satisfied. In the end, it was Zhao Shiran who relented, so the marriage was settled again. But now old Madame Zhao regretted it again. Although it is not good for a girl to break off a marriage, we can think of a way to delay it first and let Duke Xing's mansion break off the marriage. Afraid that Zhao Shiran would feel wronged, old Madame Zhao persuaded. Grandma, there is no need to retreat. In fact, there is something we can do. Prince Chen may not be interested in 5th Miss Xiao for a long time. We can just wait quietly. Zhao Shiran shook her head and said. Chu Liuchen's smiling face flashed in her eyes. He was handsome and extremely gentle. He seemed to be very gentle to everyone, right? Do you really want to marry into Duke Xing's mansion? Old Madame Zhao sighed. She felt that it was not a good idea, but because she loved her granddaughter too much, she let her make the decision herself. Her eldest granddaughter had always been a sensible and talented girl. Although she lived in the backyard, her talent was not comparable to her brother's. Her son had always said that if her eldest granddaughter had been a man, at least the status of the minister's mansion could be maintained for 20 or 30 years. It was just that she had been born a girl by mistake. Because of this, old Madame Zhao liked to discuss many things with her eldest granddaughter, and she also listened to her eldest granddaughter's words. She also loved her eldest granddaughter like a treasure. She was not worried about the marriage being delayed again and again. She always felt that her eldest granddaughter deserved better. In fact, the first young master of Duke Xing's mansion did not deserve her eldest granddaughter. When she went to Duke Xing's mansion to cooperate with old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion to put on a show, she also wanted to fight for her eldest granddaughter. It was obvious that her eldest granddaughter deserved better. Why did Duke Xing's mansion not give her the position of heir of Duke Xing's mansion? Grandma, don't worry. Since this marriage has been made, no one can say what will happen in the future. Moreover, it is father's idea to marry into Duke Xing's mansion. Zhao Shiran said with a smile. Her eyes were gentle, and her smile was light. She was not shy at all when talking about this marriage. It seemed that she was talking about someone else's business. Although she had an extraordinary bearing, she always felt that she lacked the gentleness of a young girl who was about to get married. Seeing that old Madame Zhao still wanted to say something, Zhao Shiran shook her head with a smile and said, Grandma, don't persuade me. I know what I am doing. For the sake of father and the affairs of our mansion, I have no complaints. No matter what will happen in the future, I have no complaints. Only after marrying into Duke Xing's mansion could it be possible. She had to marry, whether she wanted to or not. What she wanted was not only the position of heir of Duke Xing's mansion. Chapter 842. When Chu Luqian came over, Xiao Wanru was still looking at the screen wall opposite quietly. Her eyes almost slid across it word by word. She read every word very carefully. As she read, she carefully recalled the faint figure at the bottom of the center. She bit her lip gently and swallowed the tears in her eyes. She didn't want to cry, let alone cry in front of the screen wall. This was the screen wall left by her father. Her father had written it word by word, from immature to powerful. Every stroke was her father's handwriting. Without her father, she was like duckweed or willow catkin. In her last life, she was scattered and trampled on by others. Of course, her father's words could not be kept. Now she would definitely keep this courtyard and this screen wall, and she would never let her father's works be covered in dust again. Are you still reading it? Chu Liuqian's voice came into her ears, which was very gentle. Father wrote it very well. Xiao Wanru sniffed and replied softly, still staring at the screen wall in front of her. Do you want to stay here? Chu Luqian obviously knew what Xiao Wanru was thinking. He reached out and pulled her hand, which was tightly clenched together. He held her hand with his slightly cold hand and wrapped her hand with his big hand. When his hand fell down, the wide sleeves slipped down, and the two hands could no longer be clenched. Although Chu Liuchen's hand was slightly cold, it was still a little warmer than Xiao Wanru's, which pulled her out of a cold environment at once. The bone-piercing chill seemed to spread from her limbs to her heart, and then from her heart to her limbs and all over her body. But now, because of Chu Liuchen's hand, she was pulled out of such a situation. She turned to look at Chu Liuchen. His eyes had always been extremely beautiful. When he was happy, they would be extremely shimmering. When he was angry, they would also be extremely shimmering, as if they could reflect people's hearts. Being looked at by him clearly, Xiao Wanru's silent affection and doting love were clearly reflected in her eyes. Biting her lips, she became inexplicably nervous. She moved her hand, wanting to slide it out of his big hand. Unfortunately, his grip was too tight, and he didn't intend to loosen his grip at all. Because his grip was too tight, she even felt a kind of pain from his grip. However, this feeling also made her more and more awake. This was this life, not the previous life. Her hand slowly relaxed, allowing him to hold it tightly. Her eyes slightly drooped down, no longer carrying vigilance and nervousness. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, like the wings of a tired butterfly, revealing some fatigue. Suddenly, a force came from her hand, and her body uncontrollably moved forward and fell into a broad embrace. She heard Chu Liuchen's gentle voice, "If you want to cry, just cry. I'm here." Xiao Wanru subconsciously reached out to push him away, which was unreasonable. Although there were no outsiders here and they were inside the screen wall, it was impossible for others to see them. However, they were in Duke Xing's mansion. Although they were engaged, they hadn't gotten married yet, which was not very good. But the next moment, she suddenly dropped her hand to push him away. Then she put her arms around Chu Liuchen and buried her head in his arms with great force. At this moment, her reason dissipated, leaving only uncontrollable feelings. Today, she had asked Qing to send a message and ask him to send someone over, but she didn't expect that he would come himself. When she saw Chu Liuchen, her heart was very soft and warm. She was so excited and moved that she couldn't help but lose control of her behavior. After being stunned for a moment, Chu Liuchen's eyes became shimmering. He reached out to hold Xiao Wanru in his arms, patted her gently, and comforted her softly, "It's okay. They don't dare to treat you casually." As he said, a trace of hostility flashed across his shimmering eyes. Old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion seldom appeared in the inner courtyard, so he couldn't do anything to her for the time being. But he could do something to Duke Xing. Chu Liuchen never cared about the so-called elders in his heart. As long as Xiao Wanru hated it, he hated it. He just wanted to cherish her without principles. The body in his arms was petite and soft, making his heart beat inexplicably. It also brought him peace of mind, a peace he had never felt before. It was as if the missing piece in his heart had been filled up, making him feel complete. He didn't know when he put her in his heart and where he fell in love with her. This was the situation he was in now. From the moment he had his own consciousness, he knew that he hated the world, everything he saw, everything he knew, and more secrets. He also hated himself. Was it the fetus poison? He never cared about it, and he didn't intend to live a good life. Although he had secretly arranged a lot of contingency plans, the purpose of these contingency plans was not to get anything, but to disrupt or destroy something. Since he didn't like it, he would destroy it all. Destroying all of this, destroying himself along with everything. Wouldn't it be better to be completely clean? But all this changed at the moment when the girl in front of him slowly walked into his heart. He didn't know when he began to cherish his life and was no longer so indifferent. He began to actively cure his body, and he didn't want to die early. He wanted to live a good life and be with the girl in his heart. As his eyes fell on Xiao Wanru, he slightly pushed Xiao Wanru away and gently kissed her on her white and tender forehead. What he saw was her pink and tender cherry lips, which were delicate and charming at any time. But at this time, he really couldn't do anything outside. He sighed helplessly and let the surging feelings in his heart slowly calm down. In fact, he wanted more. But at this time, he could only restrain himself. It was not that he was not thick-skinned enough. He had always been reckless and cared about others' eyes, but he was afraid that his Zhuozhuo would be shy and angry, so he could only restrain himself. When would they get married? At that time, he could be with her unscrupulously. Soon, soon. He took Xiao Wanru into his arms again, patted her slender back gently, and gave her silent support, letting her relax all her vigilance and lean quietly in his arms. Yujie and Xiao Xuanzi had already retreated to the screen wall, leaving everything here to the two of them. What kind of person is the first Miss Xiao? After a long while, Xiao Wanru asked softly, leaning on his chest, which sounded a little stuffy. I heard that she is a talented girl, different from the girls in the boudoir. She has a reputation of being as talented as a man. Chu Luqin said softly. Big brother is also a talent. Xiao Wanru added. A talent and a talented girl, a perfect match. Chu Luqin raised his handsome eyebrows and said in an extremely lazy voice. Why did they talk about the marriage for so long? I heard that they talked about the marriage when I returned to the family. Xiao Wanru asked again. They probably want to see the future of the first young master Xiao. Chu Luqin answered. Xiao Wanru fell silent. Did the so-called future refer to the position of the heir of the duke in the future? She would not allow Xiao Hua and to get the position of the heir of the duke. This courtyard could only belong to her father. In the future, she would also keep it for Hao, and not leave it to anyone else. She would not let anyone tear down the screen wall. This was the most complete memory left by her father. In the last life, she did not have this memory, nor did she know that she had this memory. In this life, she did not want to let go, even if she died. I want this place. Xiao Wanru said very calmly. This was the first time that she had told Chu Luqin what she wanted so calmly without any concealment. At this moment, she just felt that if she wanted it, she would say it directly. In front of Chu Luqin, she did not have to be so tired to disguise herself. She thought in this way and said it with a girl's willful pride. In fact, all of this had been far away from her in the last life. Then, it's all yours. Chu Luqin looked at the girl in his arms with a smile and answered softly, as if what Xiao Wanru wanted was just a piece of jewelry or a piece of clothing, without any hesitation. He liked this kind of feeling of relying on her wholeheartedly, and he also liked Xiao Wanru's childish words. In fact, he did not have to be so tired. You can have whatever you want. Just do it boldly. I'm here for you. Chu Luqin said again with sparkling eyes. If it was his own intention, of course, he would protect Xiao Wanru by his side, so that she would not be hurt or bear any hardships. However, he also knew that Xiao Wanru had never been an ordinary girl. She was more willing to use her own means to get what she wanted. He had already known this when he saw the little girl's firm and decisive eyes for the first time. It was also because of this that he became interested in her and then stepped into her life step by step. He did not know where the love came from. Was it at this time or in the subsequent transactions? Chu Luqin did not know, and he could not find out. He slightly raised the corners of his mouth. If he had known that she was the person who could save him from the bottomless darkness, he would not have been so bad at that time. But now it was not too late. He would let her live a carefree life and provide her with a strong backing whenever she needed him. He would protect her in everything. She could move forward boldly with him at ease. As long as she wanted it, he would give it to her. Xiao Wanru blinked and then blinked again. She did not speak and bit her lips. She felt very bitter but extremely happy. At this moment, she wanted to cry, but she was no longer sad. Were they tears of joy? She did not know. She just felt like a person who had been trekking for a long time and had lost hope. Then she saw a warm smile, a doting look, and a kind embrace. Everything seemed very real and full of happiness. She silently raised the corners of her mouth. She liked this man, the prince who had seen her extremely bad at the beginning. Who is it? A scolding voice suddenly came from outside the screen wall. It was Xiao Xuanzi's voice. I was asked to come here by Old Madam. Old Madam wants to invite your highness to stay for lunch and ask for Prince Chen's opinion. The little servant girl, who was sent by Old Madam, stood trembling at the gate of the courtyard and said with a pale face. My master has something to do, so I don't want to bother Old Madam of your mansion. Xiao Xuanzi said bluntly. His master would go to the imperial palace to have lunch with the Empress Dowager later. How could he have time to accompany Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion? Xiao Xuanzi could not like anything that his master did not like. Yes, I will go and report it now. The servant girl hurriedly said, turned around and ran. Because of the panic, she accidentally hit the corner of the wall. She screamed in pain and limped away in a hurry. Chapter 843. In the wall, Xiao Wanru smiled silently and pushed Chu Liuchen's arms away. Because she leaned against Chu Liuchen's arms, her little face was flushed. What are you laughing at? Chu Liuchen let go of her and asked in confusion, letting her stand beside him. Nothing. Xiao Wanru shook her head. Of course, she wouldn't tell Chu Liuchen that she was very willing to see Old Madam's expression of wanting to be angry but not daring to be angry. Without Xiao Wanru's words, Chu Liuchen also knew what Xiao Wanru was laughing at. He reached out his hand and flicked Xiao Wanru's forehead gently, and then said in distress, time passes too slowly. Your Highness, there's something urgent. Xiao Wanru reached out her hand to cover her forehead, looked at Chu Liuchen with her watery eyes, and said discontentedly. Of course there is. I'm not young anymore. I haven't married a princess yet, so I can't sleep late at night. Chu Liuchen teased seriously. Xiao Wanru's face turned so red that it almost bled. This person was getting more and more thick-skinned. He could even say such words. The mysterious elegance he had shown when they first met had disappeared. Was this person really the Prince Chen she had seen before? Your Highness, it's getting late. You'd better go back early. Xiao Wanru reached out her hand to push Chu Liuchen and said with a blush. Seeing that she was so shy but pretended not to understand, Chu Liuchen laughed and reached out to hold Xiao Wanru's hand again. This time, Xiao Wanru had been on guard. She stepped back and put her little hands behind her back. When will you go back to the mansion with me? Chu Liuchen didn't take it seriously and laughed loudly. Looking at the shy girl in front of him, he became more and more happy. Your Highness, you can go. Grandma has something to talk to me about. Xiao Wanru was shy. At this time, she couldn't stand it anymore, so she gave him a coquettish look and said. Okay, I'll go back. Alas, I'm so unfortunate. I'll be thrown away after being used. Chu Liuchen shook his head and looked helpless. Seeing this, Xiao Wanru blushed more and more. Was he more and more shameless now? Do you want me to send you back? Seeing that she was too shy to look at him, Chu Liuchen changed the topic and asked with a smile. No, you can go back first. I'll be there in a while. Xiao Wanru shook her head and said. Are you sure? In fact, I'm quite useful as a flower guardian. Do you want to use me? Chu Liuchen asked. Looking at him talking nonsense with a serious face, Xiao Wanru felt that if she continued to watch him, she might not be able to help but want to beat him. She stretched out her hand and turned him around. Wang Ye, you should go back first. I still have something to do, so I won't send you off. Chu Liuchen pushed hard and took a few steps. Then he turned his head and asked with some doubts, you really don't need me? The smile at the bottom of her eyes almost overflowed. Xiao Wanru bit her lip and felt that she was wrong just now. The person in front of her was still the extremely nasty Prince Chen. Seeing that Xiao Wanru just stared at him without saying anything, Chu Liuchen stopped teasing her and said with a smile, then I'm leaving. Take care, Your Highness. I won't see you off. Xiao Wanru pouted slightly, stamped her feet, and said angrily. Okay, I'll leave now. Do you want to know about Miss Xiao? Chu Liuchen narrowed his eyes and stopped teasing her. Yes. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and made a decision. What happened today? The first Miss Xiao was so calm as if she was a bystander, which made Xiao Wanru feel very strange. No matter how she looked at it, the first Miss Xiao didn't look like a new bride who was about to get married. No matter in front of old madam or Xiao Wanru, she didn't show any shyness of a new bride. She was so generous. Or rather, it wasn't natural and unrestrained. Was it just an indifferent attitude? She heard that her elder brother loved Miss Xiao very much, and it was because of her that they finally got married after such a long time. She had thought that Miss Xiao must be the same. After all, she had been entangled with Xiao Hua and for 3 years and finally got married. Xiao Wanru didn't believe that there was no affection between them. But now it seemed that it was not what she had imagined. What was the reason? The position of young Madam of Heir of Duke? Xiao Wanru didn't figure it out at the moment. After Chu Luqian left, she thought for a while. Because she didn't know Zhao Shiran well, she couldn't think of it at the moment. She could only wait for Chu Luqian to send her the information about Zhao Shiran. Now she stopped thinking about it and went to old Madam's Chuntang courtyard with Yujie. She had to go back and tell old Madam that Chu Luqian had gone back. When she arrived at old Madam's place, old Madam was sitting in the main room drinking tea quietly. Hearing Xiao Wanru coming, she waved her hand to let her in. Xiao Wanru came in and bowed to old Madam and sat down. Your elder brother's courtyard was burned down. It's my fault. I shouldn't have locked your second sister in that courtyard to copy the so-called women's precepts. Otherwise, such a thing wouldn't have happened. Let's leave it at that. I will punish your second sister. There are many courtyards in the mansion. I just thought about it and found that the Chilhui courtyard, which is close to your courtyard, is not bad. What do you think? In fact, the Chilhui courtyard was not too close to Xiao Wanru's courtyard, but it was located at the edge of the first branch. It could be said to be the courtyard of the first branch or the second branch. I think it's good, too. Xiao Wanru said softly. Xiao Hua's previous courtyard was originally intended to be burned down by old Madam, so she chose an inconspicuous one. Now Xiao Hua would not feel wronged if he didn't get the Chu Huan courtyard. Although Duke Xing's mansion simply divided the positions of the first branch, the second branch, and the third branch, in fact, it was not so clear. This courtyard could not be said to belong to the first branch. She had no reason to object, and she couldn't object. There were only her and Hao in the first branch. Hao was still living in Great Elder Princess's mansion. There were so many empty courtyards, so there was no reason to object. Now it was the second branch who was in charge. Strictly speaking, her niece was living under someone else's roof. Since she had to agree to it, and she had to agree to it, Xiao Wanru didn't say much. Old Madam was satisfied with Xiao Wanru's tactfulness. After asking her a few more questions about what Chu Luqian had said just now, she let her go back. Xiao Wanru came out of old Madam's courtyard and went to the Piaoyin courtyard. What would happen next was not up to her. Time was tight, but he believed that old Madam had also prepared for it in advance. Perhaps not only old Madam had prepared for it, but even her elusive second uncle had also prepared for it in advance. It should not be a good thing to burn it. As for the other things that had been prepared for it, it was naturally fast to set them up. However, there would be no more things for her. After such a thing happened, at least before they got married, they would not plot against the Chu Huan courtyard. In particular, Chu Luqian deliberately said those words today. Even if old Madam and Xiao Jing had other ideas, they had to reconsider at this time. Fifth Miss, Duke Xing invites you over. As soon as she walked to an intersection, she saw an old maid coming in a hurry. When she saw Xiao Wanru, she came up to salute in surprise. Second uncle wants to see me. Xiao Wanru said in surprise. Chu Luqian did go to Xiao Jing's courtyard just now, but she did not go there. Wasn't it better to ask old Madam and Xiao Caihuan instead of her? Yes, it's 5th Mississippi. Duke Xing has something to ask 5th Mississippi. Please go there. The old maid said with a smile. Xiao Wanru nodded, turned to the outer courtyard, and asked casually, when did second uncle come back? Did he meet Prince Chen? Chu Luchen did not say it just now, so she did not ask. She did not know if they met. Duke Xing just came back and did not meet Prince Chen. The old maid answered neatly. At first glance, she could tell that she was smart. Xiao Wanru was silent and followed the old maid all the way to the outer courtyard. Instead of going to Xiao Jing's courtyard, she went to Xiao Jing's study. In the past, when Xiao Jing had something to ask Xiao Wanru, he would go to this study. At the door of the study, the old maid asked Xiao Wanru to wait for a while and went in to report. Soon, Xiao Wanru was summoned to go in. Behind the large desk in the study, Xiao Jing sat there with a dignified look and looked at Xiao Wanru with scrutiny. Did he really underestimate his niece? Xiao Wanru stepped forward and bowed, and then stood aside with her head lowered. Sit down first. Xiao Jing said gently. Xiao Wanru nodded and sat down in a chair beside him. She put her hands on her knees and rubbed the handkerchief in her hands in confusion. It could be seen that she was not calm. Xiao Jing's eyes also fell on her hands. Seeing her movements, he knew that she was not calm at this time, so the smile on his face became more and more kind. He said, I heard that people from Minister Zhao's mansion came today. Did they make things difficult for our mansion? Xiao Wanru didn't think that it was necessary to tell her about it, but since Xiao Jing said it, she had to answer. She nodded at once and said softly, it's nothing serious. They just talked for a while. Just now, Grandma said that the Chilhui courtyard will be your wedding house. Of course, Xiao Jing understood the meaning of the Chilhui courtyard. He looked at Xiao Wanru calmly again. He really couldn't see much fierceness from his niece. Was it really all because of Prince Chen? Did Prince Chen care about Xiao Wanru so much? This courtyard is good. I lived with your father when I was young, and then it has been empty. Xiao Jing sighed softly with a trace of relief in his eyes. He had a good look and gave people a gentle feeling. At this time, he made people feel more and more favorable. It was hard to believe that such a person was someone who harbored evil intentions. However, one couldn't judge a person by his appearance. Xiao Wanru lowered her head slightly to hide the coldness in her eyes, as if she was thinking of her father and felt infinitely sad. This yard belongs to your father. Now that you've given it to your eldest brother, second uncle has to compensate you. Originally, we had to send you some dowry when you got married, so I'll send 2 more to show my guilt to you, Xiao Jing said with a sigh. That's right. I'll send you 2 more. Xiao Jing sighed. Second uncle, you don't have to do this. The mansion has already given me a lot, so I don't need to give you more. Xiao Wanru refused softly. What he said was true. Because of great elder princess's domineering attitude, Duke Xing's mansion didn't dare to covet this dowry anymore. Most of the dowry fell into their hands, and some of the dowry that hadn't been settled were made up with money. Although some of the money was less, it seemed that it would be made up in this way. Why did Xiao Jing mention the dowry at this time? Hadn't he always avoided this matter? Chapter 844. Your mother's dowry is naturally yours and how hers. As for the dowry I gave you, it's also my kind intention. Just accept it. I've been close to your father since I was a child, and I'm closer to him than ordinary brothers. But I didn't expect that my elder brother would, and I didn't expect that he would let you wander outside for so many years. If I had known that you were here, I would have sent someone to pick you up early. Xiao Jing sighed, and the shame on his face became more obvious. Second uncle, no one wants this to happen. Xiao Wanru said softly. She bit her lip and looked as if she didn't want to continue talking about it. She couldn't bear to look back on the past. No matter how much she thought about it, it would only add to her sadness. I'm sorry to you and my elder brother. I should have made up for it. I entrusted the affairs of the inner court to the Jiang family, thinking that the Jiang family would handle it well. But in the end... Wanru, I'm sorry to you. Xiao Jing's voice became more and more sad. Did he mean that what the Jiang family had done before had nothing to do with him? Xiao Wanru's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and then she suppressed the coldness in her heart. She raised her head, shook her head sincerely, and said, "Second uncle, these things have nothing to do with me. It's the best that you can think in this way. Although you were raised outside, your nature is the same as my elder brother's. You're an excellent child, but you're different from Ru-er. Ru-er also suffered from the current situation." Xiao Jing directed his words to Xiao Yanru. Even his daughter gave such a pertinent evaluation, which showed that he was extremely fair. If Xiao Wanru had not been reborn and had not been secretly supported by Duke Xing in the last life and ended up in such a miserable situation, she would have almost believed it. She felt that her good second uncle was really a good person with good character. It was the Jiang family and Xiao Yanru's fault, which had nothing to do with him. His intention was good, but no one expected that he would end up like this because of his wife and daughter. It was inevitable that a man's wife was unvirtuous and his son was unfilial. This kind of thing couldn't be blamed on him, and it would make others feel sympathetic. However, did her shrewd second uncle really not know about it in the last life? The Jiang family and Xiao Yanru all knew about it, but he, the head of the family, didn't know about it. In Xiao Wanru's opinion, this second uncle not only knew about it, but also had been pushing things forward. Now there was no one else around, so this good second uncle had to come forward. When the water comes to the bottom, the stone has to be revealed. Big sister is now in the deep palace. I don't know how she is doing. Xiao Wanru pretended not to understand Xiao Jing's words and asked softly. Your eldest sister, she. Alas. Xiao Jing sighed softly and found it hard to speak. After a long while, he said, Wanru, I don't want anything from you. I just want you to be nicer to Ru when you meet her in the palace, so that people in the palace don't misunderstand and trample on her. He didn't ask Xiao Wanru to take care of Xiao Yanru in the future, but he asked Xiao Wanru to treat Xiao Yanru a little better when she met Xiao Yanru in the palace in case the people in the palace looked down on Xiao Yanru. This request was too much. Even if Xiao Yanru had wronged Xiao Wanru, she had fallen into such a situation. Moreover, for Xiao Jing's sake, Xiao Wanru shouldn't speak ill of Xiao Yanru when she met Xiao Yanru in the palace. But when she thought about it carefully, she realized that it was useless and meaningless. If Xiao Wanru met Xiao Yanru in the palace in the future, she naturally couldn't speak ill of Xiao Yanru. Otherwise, Xiao Wanru would also be reprimanded. Unlike other places, there were many noble people in the palace. The empress might be very willing to get something on Xiao Wanru. If Xiao Wanru really treated her sister like this, the empress would definitely punish her. Even for her own sake, Xiao Wanru couldn't speak ill of Xiao Yanru in front of everyone. There was a trace of deepness in her watery eyes. She didn't understand Xiao Jing's meaning. He said something here and there in a humble manner, but still said nothing. Second uncle, don't worry. I will. Xiao Wanru said more and more softly. She looked delicate and delicate. Sitting there with slightly red eyes, she should have been moved. Well, let's not talk about these sad things. I can't do anything about them now. They asked for it. It would be best if they can get better, but if they can't, this is the only way. Xiao Jing stopped talking, and there was a trace of sadness on his face, but also a little bit of open-mindedness. Yes. Xiao Wanru nodded and said only one word. When your father left, he took some things in the mansion with him. I didn't care about it at first, but these days, I found that a private seal in the mansion was missing. It was your grandfather's, and there were a few pieces of calligraphy written by your grandfather. Wanru, have you seen them in your father's relics? Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Jing blankly, as if she didn't understand what he meant. She frowned slightly and said after thinking for a while, Second uncle, I didn't see these in my father's relics. Didn't you see them? But I asked the servants at that time, and they all said that your father took them away. There were only calligraphy and paintings left by your grandfather and a private seal. If they are in Wanru's hands, you can show them to me. I won't take them away and just engrave another seal on them. Xiao Jing said more and more tactfully with a smile on his face. He looked a little kind and rich, not cunning. But the meaning in his words was very cunning. Second uncle, I really didn't. Xiao Wanru thought for a longer time this time. Xiao Jing didn't urge her. After thinking for a long time, she shook her head and said affirmatively again. It should be in Big Brother's hands. Wanru, show me your father's relics. Maybe you don't know. Don't worry, I won't really take the seal away. Xiao Jing asked again. This time, he looked a little anxious. If Xiao Wanru hadn't been secretly observing him, she wouldn't have noticed this little change. It seemed like this was the true purpose of this kind and benevolent second uncle. She felt relieved. What she was most afraid of was not others' schemes, but when others' schemes hadn't been put on the table. At that time, even if she had been reborn and thought of many things, she might not be able to take the lead. It was already very good for her to guess some things. Do you still have your father's relics? Xiao Jing asked. My father didn't have any relics except the seal and a glass cup. I haven't seen anything else. Xiao Wanru shook her head. What she said was true. These were the two relics Xiao Wanru saw at first, and they were also the key to her recognizing her as her father. But in fact, old Madame Qin asked someone to send a package to her, and some of the things in it were now in Xiao Wanru's place. But she wouldn't let Xiao Jing see them, so she made an excuse. Even if Xiao Jing investigated it, he couldn't find this kind of thing. His grandmother, old Madame Qin, said that few people knew about it, and even Madame D didn't know it. Except for a few conspicuous relics that caught Madame D's attention, the others were not eye-catching, so Madame D didn't spy on them. Forget it if you don't have them. I'll look for them again. They might be left in other places in the mansion. Xiao Jing's eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's face and he looked at her carefully, as if he wanted to see if she was lying, and then he said slowly. Then look for them again, second uncle. Xiao Wanru nodded. If you need anything else, just tell me. Although I don't have much ability, I will definitely help you if I can. We are a family, so you can't be estranged because of others. Xiao Jing exhorted. From this aspect, he really looked like a diligent old father, which made people feel good about him. Thank you, second uncle. I know. Xiao Wanru also became more and more gentle. Then you can go back first. Xiao Jing said with a smile. Xiao Wanru stood up and bowed deeply to Xiao Jing, and then turned to leave. Looking at Xiao Wanru's back, the smile on Xiao Jing's face slowly faded and finally became gloomy. Could it be that he was wrong? Was he really not there? But if he was not there, where did he get the previous one from? He reached out to rub his eyebrows. Of course, the more of those calligraphy, the better. In this way, he could increase the bargaining chips at hand. He didn't think of it before, but now he thought of it, so he had to find out the truth. He couldn't give up halfway. He would not give up until he saw his elder brother's relics. Or it might be in Ningyuan Army General's mansion. After all, he was still a child who didn't know anything at that time and couldn't even remember his own background. Come on, invite Ningyuan Army General to our mansion for a small gathering. Thinking of this, he had made up his mind and said coldly. After his originally smiling face straightened, it inexplicably made people feel a kind of chill. Xiao Wanru didn't see Xiao Jing's change of expression, nor did she know that Qin Huayong was going to meet Xiao Jing's appointment. She now looked at the young man in front of her in astonishment. She was so surprised that she almost couldn't speak. It turned out to be Yan Shi. When Xiao Wanru was reborn, she hated Yan Shi. But after a period of rebirth, she found that there was something strange about it. In the end, this child Yan also declined. He was different from Wang Xingxue. It was said that Wang Xingxue lived a very good life. They both dealt with her, but why did the two end up so differently? Before meeting Yan Shi, Xiao Wanru didn't want to think too much about other people's affairs. But when she suddenly saw Yan Shi that day, she remembered something. Later, she found that he was the son of Xiao Jing's old friend, which was even more surprising. It was just that this accident had happened in front of him, and it was an accident within an accident. Her watery eyes changed from surprise to indifference, and then became indifferent. She leaned to one side, avoided Yan Shi's salute, and bowed sideways. "Child, you're too polite." The two of them almost bumped into each other at the intersection. The intersection was not big, and it was at the corner of a rockery, which blocked people's view. Yan Shi had something on his mind, so he walked fast. He was going to see Duke Xing. This was the outer courtyard, so he was not afraid of bumping into the family members. Unexpectedly, he almost bumped into someone, and it was a Mississippi. If Yan Shi hadn't reacted quickly, he and Yan Shi would have bumped into each other at that time. Chapter 845. Xiao Wanru took a step back and looked at Yan Shi opposite her in astonishment. In the last life, she had only seen him from a distance and felt that he was good-looking. Now, when she looked at him carefully, she found that there was a heroic spirit in the corners of his eyes and the tips of his eyebrows. He didn't look like a Confucian scholar. If he put on a battle robe, he might look more like a small general. She looked him up and down thoughtfully with her watery eyes. Since she knew that child Yan should have been schemed against, Xiao Wanru still felt a little sympathy for him. Was he influenced by her or for other reasons? It was not until now that she felt that the mystery in the last life was somewhat clear. Yan Shi was also very surprised. He was summoned here by Duke Xing, but he didn't expect that he almost bumped into someone in a hurry. What he saw was a young miss, who was not tall. At first glance, he saw a pair of bright watery eyes. At first glance, the color of her eyes seemed to be a little attractive, but if he looked closely, he would find that her eyes were clear and crystal, which was extremely beautiful. She had a snow-white and tender face, delicate facial features, and long eyelashes that fluttered twice, reflecting the color of her eyes even more like water. Her lips were like the color of a blossoming flower, rich and beautiful, causing her to give off a kind of beauty that could topple cities. The first Miss Xiao. After a trace of surprise flashed in Yan Shi's eyes, he immediately became clear. This was a sudden thought in his mind, but he immediately denied it. Now that the first Miss Xiao had entered the imperial palace and became the emperor's treasure forest, who was this person in front of him? He only heard that the first Miss Xiao was a stunning beauty, but he had never heard of anyone else. He lowered his eyes, stepped aside, cupped his hands respectfully to Xiao Wanru, and then stopped looking at Xiao Wanru. This was a respectful and courteous person. Just now, when he saw her, his eyes were filled with amazement. However, it was only amazement, just like how an ordinary person would feel amazed when they saw a bunch of flowers. There was nothing else. His eyes were clear, and his behavior was even more courteous. Such a person would never have the scandal that happened in her previous life. After thinking about it in her heart, Xiao Wanru winked at Yujie. Yujie understood, took a step forward, put her hands on her waist, raised her head, and scolded, "Who are you? How dare you run around in the Duke's mansion? What if I really hit someone? I'm a scholar living in your mansion. My father and Duke Xing are old friends. Just now, I specially came here because of Duke Xing. I didn't expect to offend you. I'm really sorry." Yan Shi bowed deeply and said very politely. In this way, it seemed that Yujie, the little maid, was unreasonable and impolite. "The High Duke is looking for you. When did you get someone to look for you? You were obviously looking for our miss just now," Yujie said unhappily, looking more and more arrogant. Many manners had this kind of servant girl who would step on the lower and climb higher, especially those first-class servants. Sometimes, they were even harder to serve than their masters. In order to curry favor with her master, she would rush out and act arrogantly and rudely. Of course, the master had to be doted on, and the person in front of her should be one of them. Yan Shi was quite helpless. The servants of the Duke's mansion she had met in the past were not bad, but she didn't expect to meet such an arrogant servant girl. Her question was even more rude, as if Duke Xing could only look for their miss but not anyone else. Although she was unhappy, Yan she couldn't argue with a servant girl. She immediately said lightly, Duke Xing asked someone to call me before, saying that he had something to do with me. He should have come earlier, but he was delayed for a while, so he left in a hurry. Xiao Wanru slightly frowned, and a trace of deepness flashed across the bottom of her eyes. If Yan she had come earlier, she would have met her in Xiao Jing's study. Of course, it was also possible that she couldn't come earlier, so she must have met her here. If that was the case, why did she come here? In the last life, she and child Yan had been dragged into a group. In the end, no one got a good result. What about in this life? She raised her watery eyes slightly and asked softly, Child Yan, are you the son of second uncle's old friend? Hearing Xiao Wanru's voice, Yujie stepped aside and made way for her. Yan she raised his eyes and glanced at the beautiful and charming miss opposite him with a little confusion in his eyes. Except for the shock at first sight, he didn't have a good impression of Xiao Wanru. What kind of master had what kind of servant girl? The servant girl in front of him was not good, so how good could the master be? He didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would be very gentle when she spoke, which was different from what he had imagined. After glancing at Xiao Wanru, he lowered his eyes and said, My father has a relationship with Duke Xing's mansion. Not just with second uncle, but with our mansion. Xiao Wanru keenly grasped the meaning of his words. Her heart beat wildly, and it seemed that she had an idea. Yes. Yan she said coldly. He didn't think it was necessary to talk about this kind of thing with a weak girl in the boudoir. Xiao Wanru blinked her eyes. Seeing his indifference, she knew that she couldn't get anything out of him even if she asked again. She immediately nodded at him and walked forward slowly with Yujie. They were still at the door of Xiao Jing's study, so it was not a place to talk about it in detail. Looking at Xiao Wanru's back, Yan she frowned and felt very surprised. Xiao Yanru was such a servant girl, but Xiao Yanru didn't pester her endlessly. It was really strange. She had thought that this arrogant miss would not leave so easily if she didn't want to tell her. He didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would just ask and leave without hesitation. It was really surprising. He couldn't help but look back, and then his heart skipped a beat. Second uncle. If she called him second uncle, she must be the miss of the eldest branch who had been lost outside. She was the granddaughter of Rui, and great elder princess, who had a good reputation and observed mourning for her parents in the nunnery for 3 years after recognizing her ancestors. Or now she could be said to be the future Princess Chen. If it was her, everything just now could be explained. She was actually a good servant girl. It was said that she didn't have a good life in Duke Xing's mansion, so she had such a servant girl to protect her master. Young master. The servant followed behind him. Seeing that he was lost in thought, he reminded him. They had come late before. Let's go. Yan she nodded, let go of the sigh in his heart, turned around and strode to Duke Xing's study. In the study, Xiao Jing lowered his head and sorted out the books. Hearing the servant's report, he nodded and let Yan Shi in. After entering the door, Yan Shi bowed to Xiao Jing and respectfully retreated to one side. Nephew, please sit down first. Xiao Jing said politely. After Yan Shi sat down, he said with a smile, Your father sent a letter saying that he's going to arrange a marriage for you in the capital city. You're not young anymore. If you can get it this time, your father will be relieved to find another wife. Xiao Jing took out a letter, shook it with a smile, and said. Yan Shi had just received his father's letter, so he knew that it should be sent with his letter. After thinking for a while, he stood up, made an obeisance to Xiao Jing, and said, Uncle, I will follow your orders. Xiao Jing waved his hand, motioned him to sit down, and then said with a smile, This marriage is a good relationship between the two families. I can't think of any suitable family in the capital city for the time being, but it has always been a way to find a son-in-law. After you pass the examination, there must be a mansion willing to marry you. At that time, I will choose one for you, okay? Uncle, I will follow your orders. Yan Shi said gently. Although he looked heroic and gentle when he smiled, which made people feel good about him, he didn't want to refuse Xiao Jing's orders at all. He didn't mean to refuse Xiao Jing's words at all. When he came to the capital city, his father had told him so. His marriage was originally planned to be in the capital city. Now Duke Xing's mansion was in such a situation that they couldn't even take care of themselves, so they really had no time to help him deal with his marriage. But if you like someone, you can also tell me, and I will help you inquire about it. Xiao Jing said. She was silent for a moment and didn't answer immediately. It seemed that he was a little hesitant. Do you really like a miss from a family? Xiao Jing asked curiously. She was silent again, and then he raised his head and shook his head. I don't like any miss from a family. I just suddenly remembered something my father said before. His words were very sad. He had been in the capital city for a period of time. In order to prepare for the exam, he usually didn't go out. Now he thought that he really hadn't seen his father for a long time. After you pass the examination, you have to stay in the capital city. Even if your father can't see you, he should be happy to see you like this. Xiao Jing comforted him, and then he changed the topic. I heard that you are also good at martial arts. Your father's idea of giving up martial arts and becoming a scholar is different from your father's, right? But your father is reasonable and didn't force you to choose martial arts. My father actually wanted me to be a general at the beginning. She said, but I really like reading, so my father gave up. Your father is a reasonable man after all. Xiao Jing sighed, as if he had 100 kinds of melancholy. In the future, you will be a scholar, and your father will be a martial artist. One will be a scholar, and the other will be a martial artist, which will bring out the best in each other. I have to trouble you this time, uncle. She stood up and bowed deeply again. Xiao Jing laughed. You are too polite. If you have any problems living in the mansion, just tell me. Even if you don't come to me, you can turn to the housekeeper. I have already told the housekeeper to wholeheartedly prepare for the imperial examination. I hope you can get what you want this time, and your father can rest assured. Thank you, uncle. She said respectfully. Then you can leave now. If you have something to say, don't study too late these days. Sometimes it's good to go out for a walk. Yes. She nodded and became more respectful to Xiao Jing. Before coming to the capital city, his father told him that he didn't know the character of the current Duke Xing very well, so he asked him to be careful after coming to the capital city and not to act recklessly. Now living in Duke Xing's mansion, he found that Duke Xing had a good character and took good care of him. But why did such a person have an unvirtuous wife and an unfilial daughter? She left the study with such a thought. Standing outside the study, she looked back at the study behind her. Duke Xing was really a good character, but she inexplicably felt a little strange. Child, are we still going out today? The servant asked. It was because of this that they had been delayed before coming here. Chapter 846. Get out. She thought for a while and said. He did go out to deal with something. Fortunately, Duke Xing did not let him stay in the mansion all the time just now. Child, let's go quickly. Child Wang is still waiting there. The servant nodded and said with a smile. She walked out, but there was a trace of displeasure in his eyes. He did not have a good impression of this nephew of Duke Xing. He always felt that he was a little wretched and did not seem to be a good person. However, he seemed to be very kind to him. Even if he wanted to cut off contact with him for the time being, he could not say it. At the intersection of the corner, Wang Xingxue had been wandering around. When he saw Shi appear in front of him, he rushed over with joy and gasped, Child Yan. Child Wang. Hurry up, let's go quickly. It's not good if we are late. Then we really can't save him. Wang Xingxue said with a happy smile, and his eyebrows and eyes were almost blooming. Child Wang, please wait for us. Shi bowed to Wang Xingxue and took a deep look at him, not understanding why he was happy. Child Yan, you're too polite. It's your kindness that we encountered such a thing. I have nothing to do, and I can't bear to see someone bully a foreigner. Let's go, let's go. If we are late, something serious will happen. Wang Xingxue patted his chest and said righteously. Then he put his hand down and tried to pull Yan Shi's sleeve intimately. Yan Shi raised his hand uneasily and happened to avoid Wang Xingxue's hand. He said lightly, let's go. In fact, he did not like all kinds of accidents caused by a good deed and the friendship between him and Wang Xingxue. But since he had saved him, he had to save him to the end. The cause of the matter was actually very mysterious, but Wang Xingxue, a passerby, was more concerned about it than him. It seemed that Wang Xingxue's character was not as bad as he had imagined. The two of them talked for a while and left in a hurry. On a rockery, Xiao Wanru stood on a high place and watched the two of them leave with cold eyes. Yan Shi and Wang Xingxue were very familiar with each other, so familiar that they almost did not stand on ceremony. She did not expect their relationship to be so good. This matter was very strange. She inexplicably felt that there was something wrong with it. She still remembered that Wang Xingxue had something on Madame of Duke Xing, Madame Jiang, and the evidence that Madame Jiang killed Wang Yishu was still in his hands. But at this time, Madame Jiang was completely useless. Even if he publicized this matter, it would not do much harm to Duke Xing's mansion. So Wang Xingxue actually had nothing to threaten Duke Xing's mansion with now. Wang Xingxue was not a good person. There must be a reason why he jumped up and down to do things. In his previous life, he and Yan Shi were almost destroyed. Was it because of him or Yan Shi? What was so special about Yan Shi? Was she valued and framed by someone? Who conspired with Duke Xing's mansion and schemed against him and him together? If it was not someone else, could it be someone from Duke Xing's mansion? He didn't know that Yan Shi lived in Duke Xing's mansion before, and he was not clear about it. Now that he thought about it, if someone wanted to plot against him, it could only be someone from Duke Xing's mansion. Who was the mastermind? Take a shortcut and ask the coachman to send them off. Xiao Wanru ordered. Wang Xingxue was not willing to walk. She had an intuition that they should go to the place at the city gate she saw that day. It was a long distance from Duke Xing's mansion, and it would take them a while to get there by carriage. There was a secret there. Even if it was a maid, it was not easy for her to seek her own death in order to frame someone else. Who was the person inside? The coachman Xiao Wanru mentioned was the coachman she brought from Rui, and great elder princess's mansion. Now he was under her name and could be regarded as the coachman of Duke Xing's mansion. Yes, miss, I'll go there right away. Yujia understood what she was talking about, nodded, ran down the rockery, and found a path to the parking lot. Wang Xingxue took Yan Shi to the parking lot in the mansion first. Originally, Yan Shi did not want to trouble the people of Duke Xing's mansion. Although Xiao Jing had given her an order, she did not want to trouble them too much if she could. After all, she lived here, and it was really embarrassing to trouble others all the time. However, Wang Xingxue was different. He repeatedly said that this kind of thing was a trivial matter. Moreover, there were many empty carriages in the mansion. It was okay to use any one. If they didn't use it, they would have to go far away. It would take a long time to go out and come back, which was really inconvenient. Since he said so, Yan Shi thought that he was right. He still had to save time to study, so she went to the parking lot with him. When they arrived at the parking place, they saw a coachman feeding the horses beside him and throwing fodder. It was just in time. Pick a carriage and send me and child Yan out. Wang Xingxue did not pick a good carriage, but just pointed at a carriage casually and said to the coachman. The coachman raised his head to look at him and Yan Shi, nodded without saying anything, drove the ordinary carriage over, and said respectfully to them, "Child, please." In the past, several coachmen were indifferent to Wang Xingxue when they saw him. Everyone knew that this child Wang was not liked by old madam, and even Duke Xing did not pay much attention to him. It was said that he had made a scene in Duke Xing's mansion before and was very unhappy. The coachman did not know the specific reason, but it did not prevent them from knowing that this child Wang was not liked by the masters in the mansion, but the masters did not forbid him from coming. Therefore, The identity of this child Wang was also very embarrassing in the mansion, and the servants in the mansion also ignored him. Today, the coachman was a good person. Seeing that he was still so respectful, Wang Xingxue felt that this long-lost respect made him very comfortable, so he specially patted the coachman on the shoulder to reward him. The two of them got on the carriage, and Wang Xingxue told them an address. The coachman raised his whip and drove the carriage out of Duke Xing's mansion. Then he turned out of the street and headed for the city gate. Xiao Wanru guessed right. It was an address at the city gate. The carriage went all the way forward and made several turns. In some places, it deliberately took a few detours before it reached the destination. The reason why it took several turns was that Wang Xingxue wanted to take the road that Wang Xingxue knew. When they arrived at the back door of a courtyard, they stopped. Wang Xingxue took the lead to jump off the carriage, walked to the back door, and gently knocked on the door a few times. The coachman noticed that there was a certain rhythm in his knocking. Yan Shi also got off the carriage and stood behind Wang Xingxue. There were footsteps coming from inside the door, and then the door was opened. Wang Xingxue saw a servant girl with slightly red eyes. He moved aside and the servant girl happened to see Yan Shi. "Child Yan," the servant girl said in a sobbing voice. Seeing Yan Shi, she looked very complicated, happy and sad. "What's wrong? How is your miss?" Yan Shi asked. "Child Yan, please come in and have a look. My miss would rather die than obey you. If there is no other way." The servant girl wiped her tears with a handkerchief. The coachman sat in the carriage. From his position, he could see that the servant girl did not actually cry. She just wiped her tears with a handkerchief, which made it seem that she was really crying. "Let's go in first." Wang Xingxue glanced at the coachman warily and said in a low voice, while moving forward to let Yan Shi in. Yan Shi nodded and stepped into the courtyard. The servant girl fell behind. Seeing Wang Xingxue beside her, she also bowed to Wang Xingxue and then turned to follow Yan Shi in. The coachman saw clearly that when the servant girl bowed to Wang Xingxue, their eyes met. This feeling was very strange, as if the servant girl and Wang Xingxue were very familiar with each other. He couldn't tell what kind of feeling it was, but it was like seeing a familiar person, so he did not hide the fact that there were no tears on her face. The coachman had been paying close attention to their behavior. The fifth miss specially asked the servant girl to call him out to keep an eye on Child Wang and Child Yan. This was also the reason why the two of them happened to meet him. "Wait here first. We'll go back after Child Yan and I come out." Wang Xingxue said this when he entered the door. The coachman nodded repeatedly and then watched the three of them disappear in the courtyard. This matter seemed very unreasonable. Child Yan was obviously the leader of this matter. When the servant girl came out just now, she also looked at Child Yan. It seemed that the person inside should be someone related to Child Yan. However, the servant girl seemed to be a little familiar with Wang Xingxue and did not stand on ceremony. When the two of them looked at each other, they seemed to understand each other. The coachman was originally a member of Rui, a great elder princess's mansion, and later he was given to Xiao Wanru because the coachman was relatively clever. At this time, the more he thought about it, the more he felt that there was something wrong with this servant girl, Wang Xingxue, and the more problematic thing was this matter. Looking around, the coachman stopped the carriage at a corner, which was facing a tree on the roadside, and one end of the branch fell on the courtyard wall. This courtyard wall was the courtyard where Child Yan and Child Wang had just entered. When the carriage stopped, a few branches happened to fall beside the carriage, and a few outside the carriage, even blocking part of the courtyard wall. This was a small alley with few people. After the coachman got off the carriage, he climbed up the courtyard wall with the branches. The carriage was blocked outside, which happened to block the view of passers-by. It was a very small courtyard, and there was nothing special about it. It was like most of the small courtyards in the capital. From the carriage driver's position, he could see such a small courtyard. When he looked again, he saw that the door of the main house was slightly closed. There seemed to be the sound of a woman sobbing, and then she was saying something intermittently. The coachman could not hear what the woman was saying clearly. Sometimes he heard men's voices. Most of the men's voices were Child Wang's, and a few were Child Yan's. They seemed to be comforting the woman. From his position, he could not see what was going on inside, but he could vaguely hear these. Looking around, it was really inconvenient for him to go in. After crying for a while and saying something, the woman's voice became softer. Wang Xingxue was persuading her enthusiastically, and Child Yan's voice could be heard occasionally. After a long while, he saw a figure at the door of the main room move. The coachman nimbly jumped off the courtyard wall, landed on the ground again, and stood casually beside the carriage, quietly waiting for the people inside to come out. Chapter 847. There were many footsteps and voices coming from inside, which were clearer this time because they were outside the house. Miss Xiao, don't worry. Everything will be fine. With Child Yan and me here, nothing will happen to you. That man is just the son of a small official, so he is not a threat. Wang Xingxue's voice, with a comforting tone, became clearer and clearer. Thank you, Child Wang and Child Yan. Without you, I really don't know what to do. I am a weak woman alone in the capital city. If that happens, I'd rather die. The woman's sobbing voice was very delicate, but with a little determination. It sounded very chaste. Miss Xiao, don't worry. This matter will be solved. Yan Shi also persuaded her, feeling a headache. It was not that he didn't want to help, but he really didn't know how to help her at the moment. He was also unfamiliar with the capital city, and the only person he knew was Duke Xing. Should he ask Duke Xing for help? But if he didn't help her, he couldn't do it. He reached out and rubbed between his eyebrows. He had never encountered such a troublesome thing before, so he really didn't know how to deal with it. Miss Xiao was a delicate and pretty girl. She was about 17 or 18 years old and was very beautiful. She had a pair of big eyes that seemed to be able to speak. At this time, when she looked at Yan Shi, it made people's hearts ache. Although her appearance was not the most outstanding, she was still more beautiful than the average person. She was also a bit more fragile. For such a fragile woman to speak of such a matter with such a resolute expression, it was truly lamentable. Seeing her relying on him wholeheartedly, Yan Shi felt a headache. Don't worry, young Master Yan and I will definitely help you solve this problem. You can count on us. Such a playboy actually dared to do such a thing. It's really infuriating. Wang Xingxue said with a face full of anger. Hearing Wang Xingxue's words, Yan Shi was speechless. In fact, he wanted to discuss this matter with Wang Xingxue, which seemed to be extremely complicated. He was really just the son of a small official. How could he dare to do such a thing? This was the capital city, not Bianchue town. Any official was more powerful than this small official. How could his son develop such a character? Was it really because of ignorance? Thank you, Child Yan. Thank you, Child Wang. She took a handkerchief and wiped her face. When she raised her head again, she had a beautiful smile on her face. She looked very delicate, like a lily in the wind, tender and beautiful. She looked at Yan Shi affectionately and said, Young Master Yan, thank you for your trouble. While they were talking, they arrived at the door. The maid opened the door. Miss Xiao didn't see them out. She just stepped aside and held the maid's shoulder. She looked at Yan Shi reluctantly and said, Child Yan, if you can save me in the future, I will definitely. She didn't finish her sentence and blushed instead. Before Yan Shi could speak, Wang Xingxue had already clapped his hands and said to Miss Xiao with a smile, Miss Xiao is indeed a sentimental person, but our brother Yan is not an ordinary person either. In the future, he will be the top scholar. Yan Shi frowned. She didn't like Wang Xingxue's exaggerated words. Wang Gongzi, let's go. After saying that, he took the lead and walked out the door. Okay, let's go back. Wang Xingxue nodded repeatedly. Seeing that Yan Shi had gone out of the door, he turned his head and squinted at Miss Xiao secretly. His eyes fell on Miss Xiao's beautiful face with a bit of lasciviousness. Miss Xiao lowered her face, as if she didn't see Wang Xingxue's gaze. Wang Xingxue turned around and left with a smile. When he arrived outside the courtyard, he saw that Yan Shi was already waiting for him by the carriage. He immediately stepped forward with a smile and said, "Child Yan, please." Yan Shi nodded and got into the carriage. Wang Xingxue also climbed into the carriage with her. The coachman turned the carriage flexibly. When he turned around, he happened to see Miss Xiao, a beautiful woman, inside the door. His eyes became gloomy at once. He didn't know this lady. It seemed that she noticed the coachman spying. Miss Xiao signaled to the maid. The maid came over and closed the courtyard door. The master and the maid hid behind the door together. "Child Yan, what do you think of this matter? Should we tell uncle?" Wang Xingxue couldn't wait to ask as soon as he sat down. Yan Shi frowned. He didn't know how to deal with it now. Seeing him frown tightly, Wang Xingxue said again, "It's useless for me or you to intervene in this matter. Only if uncle knows it and asks him for help can we settle this matter." Miss Xiao came to the capital city alone to find her relatives. It's okay that she didn't find her relatives, but she even encountered such a thing. It's really pitiful. If Child Yan didn't meet her, she and her maid would have 2 lives. Speaking of this, Wang Xingxue sighed. There was a hint of sorrow in his voice. "Ask Duke Xing for help," Yan Shi finally said. "You'd better do so. Otherwise, we can't ask anyone else. Besides, that minor official is not a big official. As long as uncle says something, this matter will be over. The minor official's son can't rob Miss Xiao, and Miss Xiao can find her relatives with peace of mind." Wang Xingxue nodded repeatedly. Yan Shi fell silent again. This idea was actually good, but it was still very difficult to implement. There had to be a reasonable reason to ask Duke Xing for help. In fact, he had nothing to do with Miss Xiao. It was really difficult to say it in front of Duke Xing. Speaking of this matter, Yan Shi saw injustice and saved a miss who was stopped by a playboy. This miss came to the capital city alone. At that time, she was going to the Buddhist temple to offer incense. After she was chosen by a playboy, he wanted to beat her and happened to meet Yan Shi, who was out to play. All in all, it was a very coincidental thing. The foppish playboy was driven away, and Yan Shi wanted to leave after saving Miss Xiao. Unexpectedly, Miss Xiao fainted. Yan Shi had no choice but to send Miss Xiao over. After that, she met Wang Xingxue. Wang Xingxue was also very enthusiastic and accompanied him. Unexpectedly, there was a follow-up to this matter. It seemed that the foppish young master did not give up. He found Miss Xiao and forced her to be his concubine. Miss Xiao's intention was that even though her family had declined and she had to come to the capital alone to seek shelter with her relatives, she would not be his concubine. She was a girl from a good family and would never be a concubine. If he forced her too much, she would die. Such a will was not bad and was very admirable. If Yan Shi did not know it, it would be fine. Now that she knew it, she could not just watch her be forced to death in vain. That was why she took care of her. But now this matter was very difficult to solve. "Child Yan, I heard that you don't have a fiancé yet. If you tell me that Miss Xiao is your fiancé, my uncle will have a reason to intervene." Wang Xingxue rolled his eyes and helped to come up with an idea. He knew what Yan Shi was worried about. In his opinion, there was nothing to worry about. "No." Yan Shi shook her head decisively. "Why not? You just said it. Don't you understand what Miss Xiao means? If you really help her and solve her predicament, she will definitely be willing to marry you regardless of her status." Wang Xingxue reminded Yan Shi indifferently. That was exactly what Miss Xiao meant just now. "Child Wang, please don't say that. If I get her recompense, won't I ruin her innocence? It was not easy for her to refuse to be a concubine, but now she is my concubine. It's not good, it's really not good." Shi shook his head repeatedly and felt that this matter was really inappropriate. Miss Xiao was a noble person at first glance. How could such a person dare to be a concubine? Even if she said so, it was impossible for her to really do it. Then what do you think we should do? Wang Xingxue spread his hands and pushed all the blame to Shi. He did not think that this matter was originally promised by him, and he was the one who patted his chest to guarantee it. Shi frowned and pursed her lips in silence. At the moment, she was also at a loss. The sound in the carriage quieted down, leaving only the heavy breathing of the two of them. The coachman's attention had been focused on the carriage. On the way here, the two of them had hardly talked, but now they talked a lot when they went back. The carriage slowly returned to Duke Xing's mansion. When he arrived at Duke Xing's mansion, he had almost figured out what he had heard. After the carriage stopped, Shi and Wang Xingxue got out of the carriage together. Shi took out a small pouch from her bosom and handed over some broken silver to the coachman. The coachman nodded repeatedly to thank her. Wang Xingxue didn't do anything. He just pulled Shi's sleeve and left directly, not showing any respect to the coachman at all, as if it was the coachman's duty to send him, a master who was not his master. The coachman held the broken silver given by Shi in a good temper and watched the two of them leave with a smile. When Qing came back to report the news from the coachman, Xiao Wanru was making clothes for Chu Luchen, which were the measurements he had asked someone to send to her early in the morning. Yu Jie and Chu Lu helped her cut, and they listened to Qing's words silently. After Qing finished speaking, Yu Jie put down the needle and thread in her hand and said in surprise, "This Miss Xiao seems to have bad intentions, but why does she plot against Child Yan? I heard that Child Yan is just the son of an old friend of Duke Xing, so he is of no great use in the capital city, right? Is it possible that Child Yan is very rich, so she wants to plot against him?" Chu Lu blinked and asked, following Yu Jie's thoughts. Xiao Wanru didn't put down the scissors in her hand. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, and there was a hint of fierce hostility in her deep eyes. If she guessed correctly, they wanted to ruin Shi's future. But he was just an ordinary scholar who came to the capital city to take the imperial examination. Who targeted him? There were many people on the imperial examination list, but why was Shi the only one? There should be something she didn't know. Go and find out about Child Yan. Xiao Wanru raised her eyes and said slowly. It seemed that Shi should be the one to solve this mystery. She had a vague feeling that Shi's matter must have something to do with her. "Miss, I'll go and find out now." Yu Jie was a straightforward person. Hearing Xiao Wanru's words, she immediately wanted to turn around and go out. "Let Nanny Yu go. She is more familiar with the people in the mansion." Xiao Wanru stopped her. Compared with Nanny Yu, Yu Jie had always been with her, so it was easy to arouse suspicion. Xiao Wanru slightly raised her cherry lips and said meaningfully, "Nanny Yu, don't ask directly. Let's start from other places. Let's start with second uncle." Chapter 848. It was a few days later when Nanny Yu came back with the news. It was not that Nanny Yu was inefficient, but that she didn't want others to find out that the Piaoyuan courtyard paid attention to Child Yan. After all, this matter couldn't have anything to do with Xiao Wanru. It was unreasonable for her to send someone to inquire about it. "Miss, the Yan family is Bian Chui's family. They have been guarding the border for a long time, and they can be considered friends with our family. We have to trace this back to the High Duke." At that time, the High Duke and the old master of the Yan family were very good brothers. I heard that they had fought alongside the late emperor, and their friendship could be said to have been through life and death together. Nanny Yu picked out some useful information and reported it to Xiao Wanru. I also heard that the two families wanted to marry at that time, but because neither of the two families had a lineal miss, they had to give up this matter. Moreover, our duke's mansion accompanied the former emperor to the capital city, and the Yan mansion still stayed in Bian Chui to guard. Hearing this, Xiao Wanru blinked her watery eyes gently and grasped the key point. The friendship between the two families is not the friendship between second uncle and Lord Yan. Yes, it should be like this. It's not just the friendship between Duke's mansion, but the friendship between the two mansions. I heard that old madam also cares about Child Yen very much and sends someone to the outer courtyard from time to ask about him. Nanny Yu nodded. She had taken a few detours to inquire about these words without batting an eyelid. In order not to be discovered and affect her Mrs. reputation, Nanny Yu was very careful. She was afraid that the slightest mistake would damage her Mrs. reputation. In fact, in Nanny Yu's opinion, her Miss should not pay attention to an outsider at this time. Her Miss was about to become Princess Chen. If it was discovered, she might be used by someone with evil intentions and cause a great disturbance. After all, there were few people in Duke Xing's mansion who were kind to her. Mississippi. Seeing Xiao Wanru remain silent, Nanny Yu cautiously persuaded her, "Miss, I think this kind of thing has nothing to do with you." Knowing that Nanny Yu meant well, Xiao Wanru nodded and changed the topic. "Child Wang has appeared in our mansion from time to time recently. This young Master Wang is really annoying. No master likes him. Every time he comes, he really thinks he's a big boss. But the High Duke didn't say anything, so everyone can only let him come and go." There was a lot of news about Wang Xingxue. Even if Nanny Yu didn't ask around carefully, she still heard a lot. This young Master Wang hadn't been here for a period of time, but recently, he came more frequently. After he came, he liked to put on airs, as if he really regarded himself as a master in the mansion. It was really annoying. Didn't he not come when Miss Wang was gone? Xiao Wanru asked with a trace of gloominess in her eyes. She clearly remembered that Wang Xingxue did not come to the mansion when she entered the palace for the consort selection. What happened to Wang Yishu at that time made him fall out with Duke Xing's mansion. What was more, he threatened Duke Xing's mansion at that time, so even old madam had to go to worship Wang Yishu. Old madam, who was arrogant and noble, felt a little bitter to bear with it. At that time, Wang Xingxue was also fearless. It was obvious that he had a new backer behind him. Otherwise, Duke Xing's mansion would not have shown weakness and made old madam compromise. Not only did old madam send him a house, but she also took a group of sisters to worship Wang Yishu, which could be considered as giving Wang Xingxue enough face. In this case, the most normal behavior was that Wang Xingxue should no longer have contact with Duke Xing's mansion. They were originally a distant relative, so he could not go to Duke Xing's mansion in the future. After the Zhang's accident, the evidence in Wang Xingxue's hands also lost its effect. Even if Wang Xingxue wanted to come back, old madam would definitely not agree, let alone watch him act presumptuously in the mansion without saying a word. Since the evidence had lost its effect, old madam would ask the people in the mansion to never allow Wang Xingxue to enter the mansion. However, the current situation was not like this. It seemed that she turned a blind eye and let Wang Xingxue do whatever he wanted in the mansion, and the result of his doing had something to do with Yan Shi. After thinking about what the coachman reported for a long time, Xiao Wanru came to the conclusion that Wang Xingxue was absolutely not innocent in the matter between Yan Shi and Miss Xiao, and it could even be his plot. So what was Wang Xingxue's plot? Of course, it could also be said that the person behind Wang Xingxue was plotting something. This matter should have something to do with Duke Xing's mansion. Otherwise, with Wang Xingxue's previous actions, he would not be able to enter the gate of Duke Xing's mansion. Now he not only entered, but also seemed to come and go calmly. Although the servants hated him, if their masters didn't say anything, the servants would at most gossip behind their backs. "Nanny Yu, you'd better pay attention to Child Wang. He and his sister used to have a grudge against me. Even if someone finds out that you are asking about him, it doesn't matter." Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows and had made a decision in her heart. "Okay, I understand." Nanny Yu nodded hurriedly and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She was really worried that her master had taken a fancy to Child Yen. Her master was about to get married, and it was not good to pay attention to an outsider at this time. On the day of Xiao Hua En's marriage, Xiao Wanru got up early. Although it was the groom's house, she had prepared all the affairs early. After a little breakfast, Xiao Wanru went to old madam's Chuntang courtyard. As soon as she entered the door, she heard a burst of laughter. It turned out that all the people of the third branch were here. In fact, not only the third branch, but also Xiao Jia was released and sat down with her head lowered. The third madam, who had always been in poor health, also got up early today. She sat on one side of old madam, and on the other side of old madam sat Xiao Jia, Xiao Caihuan, and Xiao Keiling. Seeing Xiao Wanru come in, the third madam said to old madam with a smile, "Mother, look. I mentioned Wanru just now, and here she is." Old madam raised her eyes, glanced at Xiao Wanru, and snorted coldly with a very cold attitude. Xiao Wanru was used to this kind of cold attitude. She stepped forward and bowed deeply to old madam respectfully. Old madam waved her hand and said, "Sit down first. We are waiting for you." Xiao Wanru retreated to the chair beside the third madam and sat down. She slightly raised the corners of her mouth with a little sarcasm. He was reprimanding himself for being the last to arrive, but in fact, he had woken up early today, much earlier than the usual greetings. However, judging from their appearance, they should have been here for a while. Someone should have informed them to come in advance. She obviously didn't receive such a message. "Mother, how should we arrange today's affairs? You know that I am in poor health." The third madam coughed in a low voice and gently covered her mouth with a handkerchief. Ever since he met third madam's body seemed to be in poor health. "We don't care about the affairs of the outer court. You are in charge of the affairs of the inner court. Since you are in poor health, let third maid and fifth maid help you. Fourth maid will receive those misses and accompany them to chat and stroll. I will stay in the flower hall and talk with those madams who don't want to walk." Old madam cleared her throat and said. Xiao Wanru's hand holding the handkerchief tightened slightly and then relaxed. This was a little unexpected. She had thought that she could just accompany them like this, but she didn't expect that she would be assisting the third madam. She didn't know anything about the affairs of Duke Xing. In fact, she was not as useful as a supervisor nanny in the mansion. "Wanru, how about you manage the kitchen for third aunt?" The third madam looked at Xiao Wanru with a smile and said. "Third aunt, I don't know about these." Xiao Wanru looked at the third madam nervously with a blank look. It was not a matter of a day to manage a kitchen. Today, she was suddenly in charge of it. In this case, if anything went wrong, she would have to take responsibility. Xiao Wanru didn't think it was a good idea. "How about you manage the tea for third aunt?" The third madam seemed to feel that this matter was embarrassing for Xiao Wanru, so she didn't insist. After thinking for a while, she asked with a smile. She refused the first time, but it was not convenient for her to refuse the second time. Moreover, managing the tea could not be simpler than managing the kitchen. "Okay, then I will help third aunt manage the tea. If I do something wrong, please teach me." Xiao Wanru agreed softly, and then sat quietly aside, listening to old madam and the third madam discuss everything at the banquet. After everything was settled, old madam asked the stewards of various departments to come over. The third madam went to the wing room to meet the stewards and arrange everything today. Xiao Wanru and Xiao Caihuan accompanied the third madam. They were the third madam's helpers today, so they naturally stayed with the third madam as much as possible. Xiao Caihuan still wore a veil and sat quietly beside the third madam. Although she smiled kindly and gently at Xiao Wanru, she didn't look very flattering like before. It seemed that she had returned to her former appearance. Although the third madam was in poor health, she was very skilled and neat in doing things. During this period of time, everything in Duke Xing's mansion was handled by her, so she was very familiar with it now. After being instructed, the stewards of various departments left one by one and went to do their own work. The third madam asked Xiao Wanru and Xiao Caihuan to check the part of the affairs assigned to them respectively. Xiao Wanru went to the tea room with Yujie. She was now mainly responsible for the tea of the guests in the inner courtyard, and the reception of the womenfolk was also placed in a large flower hall in the inner courtyard. The tea room was at the side of the large flower hall. It was not a very small one and was a separate courtyard. When Xiao Wanru came over, the servant girls and old maids inside were busy. Of course, the tea was not only tea, but also some fruits and snacks. They were placed on plates one by one. Seeing Xiao Wanru coming over, the nanny in charge of the tea room hurriedly came over to greet her with a smile. When she was at the third madam's place just now, the third madam had already explained that this matter was under the charge of the fifth Mississippi. Are the snacks served today so exquisite? Xiao Wanru looked at the steaming plate of snacks and asked. In order to curry favor with Xiao Wanru, the nanny in charge specially took them out of the steamer. The small plate of snacks looked, smelled, and looked good. At first glance, it could be seen that they were excellent, especially when Xiao Wanru just had a little breakfast in a hurry. Looking at such soft and glutinous snacks, she really felt hungry. Chapter 849. Fifth Miss, this pastry doesn't come from our mansion. It was sent from Minister Zhao's mansion. After third madam asked us to try it and found that it was really good, she asked us to make it today and invite the madams and misses of our mansion to enjoy it. The nanny in charge explained with a smile. Xiao Wanru picked up a piece of pastry with chopsticks, tasted it, and then nodded. It's really good. It tastes good and looks good. Fifth Miss, I heard that this prescription was made by the first Miss Xiao herself. The Zhao's mansion has never taken it out before. This time, because the first Miss Xiao is going to marry into our mansion, they sent this prescription to our mansion. The nanny in charge smiled happily. It was naturally an excellent thing to be praised by her master. The fifth Miss was no longer the fifth Miss of the past. He had to curry favor with her properly. Xiao Wanru nodded. After eating a piece of pastry, she stood up and patrolled the wing room. At this time, some womenfolk had come over. Xiao Wanru didn't go out and just sat in the courtyard where tea was prepared. Xiao Kailing and old madam were supposed to accompany the guests, so it was not her turn to do so. He could just take a break and sit here for a while. However, she didn't succeed in the end. After sitting in the courtyard for a while, she saw an old maid rushing over. Seeing Xiao Wanru sitting in the courtyard, she hurriedly came over and saluted. Fifth Miss, old madam asked you to make some good tea and some pastries. There's no need to add too much sugar. It's not good for an old lady to eat too much sweet food. Go and prepare some pastries that are not too sweet and send them to old madam. Xiao Wanru nodded and ordered the nanny in charge who had been standing beside her. Fifth Miss. The nanny in charge said with a bitter face. What's wrong? What's the problem? Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows, put down the teacup in her hand leisurely, and asked. Fifth Miss, the pastries are basically sweet, and the prescription sent by the Zhao's mansion is even sweeter. The nanny in charge said in embarrassment. So you didn't prepare pastries that are not too sweet? Xiao Wanru narrowed her eyes and said with a cold look. At the banquet, it was natural to have as many flavors as possible. A single flavor could only be liked by some people, and most people didn't like it. It was hard to appease everyone, so it was always better to prepare a few more. The pastries sent by Minister Zhao's mansion are very good. We all feel that they are fresh and made. There are many people who like them. I didn't expect. The supervisor nanny was in a dilemma and murmured. Fifth Miss, hurry up. Madam Dowager is waiting for you. The old maid sent by Madam Dowager said impatiently. Then she turned around and left. Fifth Miss, what should we do? The nanny in charge was dumbfounded and stammered. Xiao Wanru took a deep breath, calmed down the anxiety in her heart, stood up, and walked to the largest room in the middle, which was mainly used to make snacks. The desserts inside were steaming hot, and the air was filled with white steam. When they entered, they felt like they were blinded and couldn't see clearly. The smell of dessert overflowed from the inside. It smelled good, but if one smelled it too much, it would indeed be a little disgusting. Old people really shouldn't eat these kinds of overly sweet snacks. Are the pastries made in our mansion gone? Xiao Wanru looked at the situation in the room and asked. There were pastries in the past, but it's too late now. The supervisor nanny said with trembling hands. It would take a while to make a pastry, and it would take some time to knead the powder, steam the pastry, and some other time. According to the current situation, they might not be able to use the pastries at noon. Madame Dowager urged them urgently. If she didn't send them to them quickly, she was afraid that she would come to urge them again later. What's that? She glanced at a few small pieces of leather beside the stove and asked. That's to make spring rolls. The kitchen asked us to make them. There's also a large pot of bean paste. They said that when the dishes are officially served, we are still free. They asked us to help prepare such a dessert, which is also sweet. The supervisor nanny spread her hands helplessly and said. There should be minced meat stuffing in the kitchen. Go get a pot and wrap it with minced meat stuffing. Make it like the original spring rolls. Xiao Wanru ordered. Fifth miss, is it edible? The supervisor nanny opened her eyes wide and said in astonishment. Spring rolls had always been wrapped with bean paste. She had never heard that it could be wrapped with minced meat. Go and ask someone to get the minced meat. Hurry up, Xiao Wanru said lightly. This dessert had always been sweet in the capital city, but in fact, when in Jiangzhou, it could be wrapped with other things and made into salty ones. Seeing Xiao Wanru being so decisive, the supervisor nanny could only follow her words. She asked someone to get some minced meat, and freed up a few people to make salty spring rolls under the leadership of Yujie. In fact, it was very simple and fast. After wrapping the minced meat, they were fried in the oil pan. There was very little minced meat wrapped in it. After a few flips, it floated and was ready to be used. The first pot of fried salty spring rolls was soon ready. The supervisor nanny put down the chopsticks in her hand and breathed a sigh of relief. Fifth miss, Madame Dowager urges you to hurry up. At the door, the old maid sent by old Madame came again. It was too foggy inside, so she couldn't find Xiao Wanru for a while, so she stood at the door and said. In fact, Xiao Wanru was standing by the door. When she heard the sound, she turned around and walked out of the atrium in the middle. The old maid didn't expect Xiao Wanru to stand so close. After being stunned for a moment, she hurriedly followed her out and said, Fifth miss, Yujie came out from inside, handed the plate in her hand to the old maid, and said, Here, hurry up and send it to old madam. Isn't this sweet? Just now, old madam said that even the pastries can't be too sweet, let alone the ones with bean paste filling inside. The old maid glared at Yujie unhappily. Just take it. If anything happens, I'll take full responsibility. Xiao Wanru said, walked to the courtyard and sat back in her previous seat. Seeing Xiao Wanru like this and then looking at the newly fried spring roll in her hand, the old maid stamped her foot helplessly. Stamp his foot and turned around to leave. Since the fifth miss said that she would take full responsibility for it, as a servant, of course, she couldn't really go against the fifth Mississippi. When old madam got angry later, the fifth miss would be reprimanded by old madam. In the flower hall, old madam and several older madams were talking and laughing enthusiastically. Seeing the old maid bring a plate of spring rolls, old madam's face darkened. She had already told the old maid not to make it sweet, but it seemed that it was sweeter than sweeter. Old madam, the fifth miss asked me to specially send it here. She said that old madam would like it. The old maid didn't dare to complain openly, but secretly pointed out that it was Xiao Wanru's idea. Old madam's face became more and more ugly, and she couldn't keep the smile on her face. When she gave the order just now, she said it in front of a group of old madams. Now Xiao Wanru's attitude made her feel like she had been slapped in the face. It smells quite fragrant. Let me try one. Another old madam beside her sniffed and said with a smile. An old maid behind her hurriedly came over with a small plate and put it in front of her. Old madam picked it up and took a bite. She was stunned at first and then surprised. In the end, she nodded repeatedly and said, Good, it's really good. It's really fragrant. As she said, she ate up the spring roll in front of her in a few bites. Is it really delicious? Not sweet? Another old madam asked in surprise. It's not hard. It's a little loose and salty. It tastes very good, old madam said with a smile. She motioned the old maid beside her to take another one, and then she ate it with relish and nodded while eating. Seeing that she ate so satisfactorily, the other old madams couldn't help but take one by one. After tasting it, they all nodded. They were used to the sweet ones, but this kind of salty one had a unique flavor. Moreover, it was newly made, so it tasted very delicious with a little crispness after being fried. Old people could also eat it. The anger on old madam's face slowly faded away. She also asked Nanny Yu to take one and took a bite gently. It tasted very good and very tempting. She nodded calmly at the moment, which showed that she was satisfied with Xiao Wanru's decision. Old madam, your granddaughter is really capable. She actually made such good spring rolls. I'll go to my mansion to try it later. I'm getting old, and I'm tired of eating too many sweet things. Old madam, who ate the first one, put down the chopsticks in her hand with a smile on her face. She was very satisfied with Xiao Wanru's decision. She is indeed capable. How can Princess Chen, who was personally chosen by the Empress Dowager, be not good? Another two old madams joked. Although old madam didn't like Xiao Wanru, she was still very happy to hear Xiao Wanru being praised like this. She immediately narrowed her eyes with a smile and said modestly, she is just a child and doesn't know much. Let her manage the affairs over there. She has to learn something slowly in the future. Xiao Wanru was the future Princess Chen. After marrying into the Prince Chen's mansion, she would definitely be in charge of the inner court. She should indeed learn some management methods of the inner court. However, neither old madam nor Xiao Jing seemed to think of this matter, and no one thought of helping her. Now old madam brought it up, it seemed that it was a good thing. The misses in the mansion are all smart. Even the youngest fifth Miss Xiao is so smart. She's really likable. Not to mention her good looks, I can't say anything about her character. None of my granddaughters have ever thought of such an idea. Old madams flattered old madam one after another, which made old madam smile from ear to ear. She said repeatedly, the misses in your mansion are also as beautiful as flowers. Even though this matter was over, old madam still asked an old maid to pass on her words of praise to Xiao Wanru. Since they liked it, Xiao Wanru asked the tea room to make more and sent them to other womenfolk. 2 plates of different pastries were sent out together. However, according to the servant girls who came back, everyone's favorite was not the previous plate of sweet and glutinous pastries, but the new salty spring rolls that Xiao Wanru came up with. There were even servant girls from other mansions who asked the servant girls in the tea room how they made it, what to prepare and what to pay attention to. Xiao Wanru, who was sitting in the yard, sneered when she heard such a message. Someone had predicted that she would take care of this matter, so they deliberately let her mess up the matter and lose face today to show their power. Chapter 850. Not only did she suffer a loss for no reason, but she also got angry. Since the matter had been solved, Xiao Wanru asked the nanny in charge to keep an eye on it. If there was anything that couldn't be solved, the nanny in charge should report to her immediately. She went back to the Piaoyuan courtyard and changed into a new set of clothes. When she came back, the bridal sedan chair of the newlyweds had already entered the door. Xiao Wanru didn't go back to the tea room but went directly to the Qiuhui courtyard with Yu Jie to see the newlyweds. The Qiuhui courtyard was covered in red. The clothes hanging under the porch and draped over the door were all red, which made people feel happy. In the bridal chamber, the newlyweds were sitting on the bed. The veil on their heads had been removed. At this moment, they were sitting there shyly and listening to the praises of the people in the bridal chamber. Fifth sister, you happen to be here. Let's go in together. Xiao Caihuan happened to come over and invited Xiao Wanru with a smile. Xiao Wanru nodded and they entered the bridal chamber together. There were several madams and misses in the bridal chamber. Seeing them come over, they bowed and laughed, which was particularly lively. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Zhao Shiran with a smile. Today, Zhao Shiran looked shy, like an ordinary newlywed, which was different from the feeling of being completely aloof from the matter that day. At this time, she seemed to have the feeling of marrying into Duke Xing's mansion. Xiao Wanru stood aside calmly and watched Xiao Caihuan teasing the bride with others. Xiao Wanru just smiled slightly and didn't get too close to her, nor did she give her the cold shoulder. Those who had never seen Xiao Wanru couldn't help but be amazed by her beauty. They looked at the bride sitting on the bed and then at fifth Miss Xiao, who was not very well dressed. They secretly compared them in their hearts and couldn't help sighing that fifth Miss Xiao was really beautiful. Even the bride, who was so richly dressed, lost her beauty in front of her. The banquet had begun outside, and the womenfolk in the bridal chamber began to leave. Xiao Wanru and Xiao Caihuan, who were the masters, were not in a hurry, so they simply stepped aside and let the womenfolk go first. For a moment, the bustling bridal chamber quieted down. Fifth sister, shall we go there now? Xiao Caihuan looked at Xiao Wanru and asked. Xiao Wanru hesitated for a moment. She and Xiao Caihuan performed their respective duties, so there was no need for them to go back in such a hurry. Even if they went back at this time, they were not in a hurry to have lunch. Third sister, fifth sister, don't go yet. Zhao Shiran, who had been sitting on the bed like a mute, suddenly said. Sister-in-law, what's the matter? The two of them turned back together, changed their address with a smile, and entered the gate of Duke Xing's mansion. From then on, there was no first Miss Xiao, but only the first grandma of Duke Xing's mansion. Zhao Shiran stood up and walked to his dressing table. He took out a jewelry box from the top drawer of the dressing table and said to the two of them with a smile, You two sisters have been busy today because of me. I'm afraid you can't even eat in peace. I thank you here. Here are 2 palace flowers I made myself. I want to give them to you as a thank you gift. Zhao Shiran said as he pushed the jewelry box in front of them. The two of them looked up and saw 2 exquisite silk flowers in front of them. It's so beautiful. Xiao Caihuan's eyes lit up. She immediately took out a purple palace flower and said, I've never seen such a beautiful palace flower before. Even in the palace, there is no such beautiful palace flower, is there? This silk flower was not only in the shape of a flower, but also had a pendant below, which made the originally beautiful palace flower more charming. Duke Xing's mansion had the flowers in the palace, which were usually given by the masters in the palace. Xiao Wanru also had a few boxes, which were given by the Empress Dowager before, but compared with the one in front of her, it was obvious that the one in front of her was more beautiful, and some small branches and leaves were also scattered beautifully. It's good that you two sisters don't dislike it. I made it myself. I was afraid that you two sisters wouldn't like it. Zhao Shiran breathed a sigh of relief, which made people feel good. Sister-in-law, you are so polite. If such a beautiful flower is not beautiful, how can it be beautiful? Xiao Caihuan said with a smile. She did not put down the purple flower in her hand. She liked this purple one. Thank you, sister-in-law. Xiao Wanru also thanked her politely with a smile. There was a pale white flower with pink embellishments left in the flower box. It was elegant with a bit of glamour, which was Xiao Wanru's favorite color. The 2 flowers happened to be her and Xiao Caihuan's favorite. Don't mention it. Thank you for your trouble today. Zhao Shiran bowed deeply and said. How dare the 2 of them accept her bow? After avoiding her, they bowed back. Seeing that it was getting late, Xiao Caihuan and Xiao Wanru said goodbye and went out. They had to go out at this time. They were afraid that old madam and the 3rd madam would have to ask them for help. The 2 of them parted at the gate of Chihui courtyard and went to their respective areas. Xiao Wanru went to the tea room. At this time, the tea room was not so busy, but everyone was tidying up and seemed to be in a good mood. When the nanny in charge saw Xiao Wanru coming over, she smiled so widely that her eyes could not be seen. Because the fried salty spring rolls were among the snacks prepared today, many servant girls and old maids who went out to serve in the tea room were rewarded. Of course, the nanny in charge was also rewarded. Moreover, old madam had specially rewarded them in the tea room just now. This kind of good thing was the 5th Mrs. idea. At this time, seeing Xiao Wanru, she certainly flattered her more. Fifth Miss, you haven't eaten yet, right? There is nothing else here. You can go by yourself. The nanny in charge said with a smile. Xiao Wanru looked around and found that there was nothing else for her to do. She nodded at once, turned around and went out to find a place for lunch. After lunch, some people had already left. This time, old madam called all her granddaughters to her side to help her see off the guests. Among the 3 granddaughters, Xiao Wanru received the most praise. Even if they didn't praise Rui and great elder princess's mansion behind Xiao Wanru, they had to praise Prince Chen's mansion. Many people had wondered why the Empress Dowager would choose the 5th Miss of Duke Xing's mansion for her favorite Prince Chen. Now that they saw her in person, they had to sigh that the Empress Dowager was right to choose such a delicate beauty. Of course, everyone tacitly understood that there must be Rui and great elder princess's intention in it. Otherwise, the 5th Miss of Duke Xing's mansion was not worthy of Prince Chen. However, in terms of appearance, several old madams who had seen Chu Luchen all felt that if the two of them stood together now, they would definitely be an extremely beautiful couple. Therefore, everyone praised Xiao Wanru a lot in these aspects, from her appearance to her filial piety to the new tricks she thought of today. They almost praised Xiao Wanru to the point that she was like a flower. Every time at this time, Xiao Wanru would lower her head shyly, looking like a little girl who didn't know how to behave at all. She was very obedient, which made all the old madams nod repeatedly. It was said that old madam was good at training people. Look, 5th Miss Xiao was so lovely. Old madam accepted all these praises. Most of the womenfolk left after lunch, and only some close ones would stay for dinner. However, there were few people in the afternoon, and there was nothing to do in the tea room. Xiao Wanru even took time to come back to her courtyard to rest for a while before going out. As soon as she sat down in the courtyard of the tea room, she saw an old maid rush in. Seeing Xiao Wanru, she breathed a sigh of relief and said anxiously, 5th Miss, go and have a look. Something has happened. What's the matter? Xiao Wanru asked in surprise. Even if something had happened, they should look for old madam and the 3rd madam instead of her. It's Prince Chen. Something has happened. The old maid took a few more breaths and said, Old madam asked me to come to you and ask you to go and have a look. Xiao Wanru suddenly narrowed her eyes and said with a cold look, What do you mean by something has happened to Prince Chen? Why did Prince Chen have an accident in our mansion? Yujia also hurriedly said. The old maid wiped her sweat with her hand and felt anxious, but she had to make it clear. In fact, it was not Chu Luchen who had an accident, but Chu Liuzhou and Chu Luyue who had an accident. Coincidentally, it had something to do with Xiao Wanru. After hearing the old maid's words, Xiao Wanru couldn't sit still anymore. She followed the old maid to the outer courtyard with Yujie. There was a fight in the outer courtyard, and it was related to Prince Chen and Prince Shou. The other 2 princes seemed to be involved. It was a big deal. In a men's resting place in the outer courtyard, it was noisy, but only in the courtyard. There were guards outside the courtyard to prevent anyone from coming in. As soon as Xiao Wanru came over, she was stopped from a distance. Go and report to old madam that I'm here. Xiao Wanru stopped and said slowly to the person who blocked the way. The person who blocked the way nodded and hurriedly went to report to old madam. After the accident, old madam and Xiao Jing had come over. It was they who had cordoned off the entire courtyard and prevented anyone else from coming over. Today was a big day for Duke Xing's mansion. There were not only servants of Duke Xing's mansion in the mansion, but also servants of other mansions. It was easy for bad rumors to spread. Xiao Wanru didn't wait long outside. She saw an old maid beside old madam come over and lead her in. She didn't go to the main room first. There seemed to be a lot of people in the main room, and it was noisy and noisy. In the wing room, old madam sat there with a sullen face. When she saw Xiao Wanru come in, she pointed to one side and motioned for her to sit down. The atmosphere in the room was very dull. After Xiao Wanru bowed, she sat down and waited quietly for old madam to speak. Old madam called her over in such a hurry, of course, not just to let her come to watch the fun. She heard the noise in the main room, and it should be the noise that old madam couldn't suppress. Fifth miss, can you go and ask Prince Chin to come out? Hearing that the noise in the room suddenly became noisy again, old madam couldn't help but raise her eyebrows a few times. She reached out and rubbed her eyebrows. It was originally a good thing, but it was about to become a disaster. Old madam was very annoyed.